Hey guys, welcome to part 5 of What If Neglected Naruto Became a Spider Summoner. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 30. The fifth Hokage rises. Nearly everyone in the village celebrated the death of Pain. Upon returning to the village, Menma and Shio were heralded as heroes. Konan used her paper technique to hide as thousands of villagers thanked the two ninja. After the initial celebration, it was a time of rebuilding for Konoha. Civilians and ninja worked together to restore their village. However, there was an undertone of mourning for the entire village. One of the greatest heroes that the village had ever known had disappeared. Minato Namikaze had not been seen since he had used his Hirishin to evacuate every child and woman from the village from Pain's greatest attack. They had never found a body, so there was still hope that he was still alive. But the question remained, where was Minato? Konoha's council room. The temporary Hokage, Tsunade Senju, had called everyone of importance to the council room. The daimyo had arrived to help elect a new Hokage in the absence of Minato. The clan leaders, civilian council, elders, and every Hokage-worthy ninja was present. Many veteran elite ninjas such as Kakashi Hatake and Mate Guy were present. Even not as experienced, but still powerful ninjas such as the two heroes of Konoha, Menma and Shio, are present. The daimyo presided over the meeting and started things off. After the unfortunate disappearance of our beloved Hokage, we must elect a fifth Hokage. In normal situations we would be able to wait since Minato is not confirmed dead. However, with the crisis of the Akatsuki and the annual Kage summit meeting, we cannot afford to not have an officially elected Hokage. I give the floor to Tsunade to list the candidates decided by the councils. Tsunade stepped forward and spoke to the councils. Currently we have 5 people under consideration for the Hokage seat. The candidates are Kakashi Hatake, Tsunade of the Sannin, Menma Gorgon, Shio Uzumaki, and Danzo Shimura. Many council members began whispering to each other of the benefits of each candidate and their negatives. Kakashi immediately stepped forward. I reject the position of Hokage. I am not suited for the job. Tsunade and the daimyo nodded, expecting this. Tsunade continued. I reject the position as well. We will leave it to the councils to speak on the merits of each remaining candidate. The civilian council leader, Kage Lotus, owner of most of the shinobi food stores in Konoha, began the discussion. There are pros and cons to every ninja. However, many of the cons revolve around their ages. Lord Danzo is older than Lord Third when he met his demise at the hands of the Kyuubi. On the other hand, both Shio and Menma, while extremely skilled, are still in their late teens. Hiyashi Hyuga spoke next. While I do agree that Danzo is too old for the Hokage position, both Shio and Menma have proved themselves to be capable leaders and ninja. In addition, Sunagaku's leader Gaara was only 15 when he was elected Hokage. Many people muttered in agreement. Danzo stepped forward with a narrow-eyed glare and spoke to the council. I may be old, but I still am quite powerful and a worthy candidate for Hokage. I am the most experienced shinobi and have been through 2 world wars. There is no one more worthy of Hokage than I. Suddenly many councilors and even the daimyo began to nod in agreement with Danzo's words. The old warhawk smirked until Shio shouted out, Danzo, reveal the bandages under your left eye, now. Everyone went silent as Tsunade narrowed her eyes and spoke seriously. Explain yourself, Shio. Shio stepped forward and spoke seriously to the gathered councils. I have been using my chakra sensor since this meeting began to ensure that no one used genjutsu to manipulate the decision. I have detected chakra being activated located around Danzo's left eye. Coincidentally, which is almost the same chakra pattern as Itachi Uchiha and Sasuke Uchiha when using their Sharingan. Tsunade nodded her head and everyone looked at Danzo expectantly, waiting for him to uncover his eye. Danzo looked around at his few supporters in the chambers, but none of them supported him. It would seem that the revelation of him casting genjutsu to get his way in such a public place made them abandon him. He slowly reached up and undid the bandages around his eye, revealing the 3 Tomoe Sharingan to the room. Tsunade glared at Danzo. Explain this. Now. Danzo did not seem shaken as he spoke. After the Uchiha massacre, I relieved one of their dead jonin of his eye to replace my lost one from the Third Shinobi War. Menma spoke up from where he was leaning against the wall. He is lying. Since achieving level 3 senjutsu, it is nearly impossible to lie to me. Shio nodded in agreement with Menma's words. Her ability to sense emotions had long been released to the village. Tsunade glared harder at this information and struck Danzo with her highest level of ki. To anyone not of at least Jonin level, it would seem as if Tsunade had turned into a demon, and the pressure made nearly everyone sweat. Danzo. Tell the truth. Danzo frowned and knew he could not lie in this room. He also knew even if he called his entire root force, which consisted of only 40 men, he would still lose. It would seem that he had no choice. I obtained this eye from Shisui Uchiha. Many people took a deep intake of breath as everyone remembered the incident with Shisui Uchiha's mysterious suicide. Tsunade spoke venomously at Danzo. Are you responsible for the death of Shisui Uchiha? Danzo glanced around the room, looking for possible exits. But the room had been deliberately designed for only one entrance to prevent assassinations. He finally spoke, preparing to make a break for it as he revealed this information. Yes. Before Tsunade could order the Anbu to arrest Danzo, Menma stepped forward. Are you responsible for the massacre of the former members of the Akatsuki? The room fell silent at this question. Tsunade looked questioningly at Menma. Explain yourself, Gorgon. Menma nodded and spoke. During the final confrontation with Pain's real body, we were able to learn of his past. We also learned of the true origin of the Akatsuki. Whispers broke around the council room as this information was revealed. Menma began pacing while keeping an eye on the traitorous elder. I learned that the Akatsuki were once a peace organization comprised of 10 ninja to help end the Third Shinobi War. However, that all ended when Danzo and Hanzo of the Salamandar allied themselves together to destroy this group. Hanzo had been feeling threatened by this peace group and allied with Danzo for information on the enemy. All at the cheap cost of killing all of Pain's friends and turning him into the psychopath we knew today. Danzo said nothing as his past mistakes were laid at his feet. He was about to defend his case when Yamato stepped forward. Minato and I have been searching through Danzo's past for a while now to find incriminating evidence. However, it was only till recently we found evidence of your treachery. We discovered that one of your underlings, Sai, who is still undergoing rehab for mental scarring, mental manipulation, the degradation of emotion and forced loyalty to you, Danzo. Tsunade spoke seriously. What did you find during this mission, Yamato? Yamato glared at Danzo as he spoke. All information regarding the identities of our Anbu, patrol paths, supply routes, and ninja in the field. Everything Orochimaru would need for another invasion, all delivered by the hands of Danzo's subordinate. Everyone was silent as they stared at Danzo, almost unable to comprehend the weight of his betrayal. Tsunade stood up and spoke loudly to the entire room. Danzo, you are to be executed for treason, illegal child manipulation, illegal use of genjutsu, and war crimes. Danzo was silent for a few seconds before wrenching his arm out of his left bandages, revealing that he wasn't actually crippled. I may be revealed, but I will not go down without a fight. My path is the only way this village will prosper. After removing the bandages, a large metal bracer was revealed. Danzo pressed a button on the bracer and members blew a hole in the roof and attacked many of the ninjas in the room. Tsunade quickly began issuing orders. Anbu. Kill Danzo and any of his underlings. Every able ninja assist with this operation and defend the daimyo. Roof of the council room. Danzo jumped through the hole in the roof and began releasing the bolts on his bracer. He had finally managed to release the last one as Menma and Shio jumped behind him, ready for combat. Danzo would have continued running, but black wind encircled the entire council roof so no one could get out. Danzo slowly turned to his two opponents and unclasped the last bolt from his bracer, throwing it to the ground to reveal his monstrous arm. Shio and Menma gasped as they saw the many Sharingan eyes implanted in his arm. What was worse was the face of the Shotomine Hokage on his right shoulder. Menma glared at the traitor. So this is why you betrayed Konoha to Orochimaru. He was the only person who could give you that arm. Danzo narrowed his eyes. Everything I did was for the prosperity of the Leaf Village. Shio growled as one of her eyes began to emit purple smoke. That is bullshit and you know it. Nothing good can come from consorting with traitors and breaking the minds of children to be your slaves. Before Danzo could continue, the floor beneath him shattered as Tsunade shot from the ground with an uppercut, smashing Danzo into the wind wall with such force that his entire body exploded, gore raining down on the roof. Menma looked at the gore and spoke. That was anticlimactic. Shio was about to nod her head in agreement before her senses acted up. Lady Tsunade, dodge. Tsunade didn't even question her and jumped into the air to dodge a kunai stab from an unharmed Danzo. Menma observed Danzo, ignoring Tsunade's interrogation of Danzo's abilities during the battle and focused on a way to defeat the man. Tsunade had not killed a clone, so he must have a way to either negate his death or create a powerful illusion to make them think he was dead. He no longer believed that jutsu could prevent death after witnessing Nagato's abilities. He observed as Shio sliced Danzo in half, only for him to reappear once more, forcing Shio to dodge an attack. He saw one of the eyes on the traitor's arm close. He widened his eyes, knowing what this meant. He can only revive himself 6 more times. Both Tsunade and Shio nodded, attacking Danzo with greater vigor. Menma quickly prepared to help, channeling nature chakra to only his arm. A large scythe emerged from it. He dashed forward, reappearing behind Danzo's back and cleaved down with his arm, slicing Danzo in half. Danzo reappeared and his third eye closed. There is nothing you can do. I am immortal. And now I will kill you all for the glory of the Hidden Leaf Village. Mokuden Nativity of the World of Trees. The top of the council room quickly transformed into a forest landscape, roots and branches attempting to impale the 3 ninja. Shio was easily able to cut the wood around them with her dark winds, leaving only the trees covering the outside of the chambers standing. Danzo jumped into the air, flashing through hand signs and shouted, summoning jutsu, Baku. A large elephant-like animal smashed down upon the roof, only the seals that reinforced the building prevented it from collapsing. The elephant began to breathe in air at a rapid pace and shot them out in a wave of vacuum spheres. Shio jumped in front of the attack and ran through Handseal's black wind wall. A wall of dark wind negated the vacuum spheres, allowing Menma and Tsunade to thrust themselves forward. Tsunade smashed her fist into the Baku, killing it instantly as she reduced its skull to dust. Menma slashed through Danzo once again with his scythe, closing the 5th eye. However, he just reappeared, forcing Shio to dodge a wind saber thrust. Shio growled as she quickly cut the man's head off, closing another eye. How does he keep doing this? Danzo crouched at the edge of the roof before straightening up. You do not need to know that. He dashed forward at Shio with a wind saber, who only smirked as she countered the wind sword with her own, effectively slicing through it and Danzo easily. You're a fool to challenge me in wind, Danzo. Tsunade quickly ducked a Mokuden spear from Danzo and spun around and grabbed his arm. Enough of this. You will die for desecrating the bodies of the Uchiha and my ancestors. In an instant she ripped off Danzo's entire left arm. The man only had time to widen his eyes before he was drop-kicked from Tsunade, smashing the man through the heavily reinforced floor into the chamber below, shocking the still fighting Root Ninja and Konoha Ninja. All of the Root Ninja felt the seal on their tongues disappear, and in that moment they contemplated the death of their lord. Many of them were knocked out by the clan leaders and elite jonin in the room. The daimyo straightened himself from where he had taken cover underneath his seat, a specially crafted desk that had enough seals to prevent anything below an A-rank jutsu from piercing it. Well, that was definitely more exciting than most meetings I attend. Many ninja in the room sweat dropped at his laid-back attitude and returned to their seats after the Anbu escorted the rest of the NA members out of the building. None of the elite jonin or clan heads were injured, since most of the NA members were just shunin level, nowhere near as skilled as the elite jonin in the room. The daimyo sat in his seat seemingly in contemplation for a few minutes before speaking. Watching this event, and reading this report has given me a clear image of who this village needs to become the 5th Hokage. Everyone leaned in slightly as the daimyo paused for dramatic effect. The daimyo continued with a slight smirk. So much like her father, it is my pleasure to announce that Shio Uzumaki Namikaze will be the 5th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. Everyone clapped at this information. Shio had proved herself time and again as a hero of the leaf. No one doubted her skill or ability to lead them. Shio was stunned as she stood there, looking at Menma, who was clapping, a proud smile on his face as he congratulated her. She saw her mother, who was currently seating on the Uzumaki clan head seat, crying with happiness for her. The daimyo noticed her stunned face and spoke. It is only proper. Not only did you save the village along with Menma here, but you also prevented Danzo from escaping, and were critical in taking him down. You deserve this honor. Shio nodded dumbly, and after a subtle nudge from Menma shook her head and spoke. I am completely honored, Daimyo-sama. I accept the position. Hokage Tower Balcony. Shio stared at the huge crowd of Konoha citizens, everyone there to celebrate her inauguration to Hokage. She looked behind her to see Kushina, Menma, Kakashi, Konan and Jiraiya standing there, each supporting her as she walked out to the balcony. She was adorned in the traditional Kage robes and had as she addressed the people. She took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. I thank everyone for their support in me. I may not be my father, but I assure you that I will protect my home and my country just as dutifully as my predecessors. I will bring peace to this country and ensure that everyone will be protected. Her speech continued, addressing issues such as the Akatsuki and the tentative peace with the other nations and how she wished to strengthen ties with them. At the end of her speech, she lifted the Kage hat and shouted to the crowd, I am the 5th Hokage. I will keep the will of fire burning so our precious village will continue to prosper. Everyone in the crowd cheered and began to chant her name in celebration. She continued to smile at the crowd as they began the celebrations. Feeling optimistic for the future. The Akatsuki may still loom, but they would be able to weather the storm ahead. Unknown location. In the dark void of the realm, a dark-dressed man with an orange swirly mask approached his workstation. He flashed through multiple handseals before a poof of smoke revealed a glass jar with a floating eye in it. He lifted it up and chuckled a bit, always good to have a spare. Floating ominously in the glass, the Rinnegan glowed. Unknown location. Minato woke up groggily and rose to his feet. He glanced down at the kunai he had used for his Hiroshin and cursed a bit when he realized he had made a mistake on the sealing paper. He could be anywhere. He looked around before he noticed he was on the roof of a building in Konoha. He sighed in relief until he noticed the Hokage monument. Why was Tsunade's face on the mountain? Chapter 31. The Kage Summit. Team Hubby's hideout. The members of Team Hubby lounged around the living room of their base, discussing their next move. Sasuke spoke first to his teammates. Our primary goal of killing Itachi Uchiha is fulfilled. Currently we have no other goal. However, none of you three are missing ninjas with bounties, and I most likely will be able to get a pardon from Konoha from killing 2 of their most wanted criminals. However, are there any goals any of you have before we try to negotiate with Konoha? His 3 teammates looked at each other before Mikomi spoke first. If my old clan was alive, I would be wanting revenge against them, but seeing as Kiri has already done that, I have no objections. Karen fiddled with her glasses, blushing as she spoke. I am happy just being with you, Sasuke. Jugo nodded solemnly. You are my Kage, Sasuke. I will follow you wherever you wish. Sasuke nodded. Pleased. All right. I do not wish to contact Minato Namikaze in Konoha, so we will make our way to the Kage Summit and talk to him there. Everyone nodded in agreement and they began packing. Hokage's office. Shio grumbled as she looked at herself in the mirror. These robes make me look ridiculous. Menma scratched the back of his head behind her and answered sheepishly, it is a required tradition to at least arrive in your Kage robes. During the meeting you can wear whatever you wish. Shio grumbled petulantly about the unfairness of the situation and changed back into her normal clothes. When she arrived from the dressing room, she was dressed in her red battle armor. Menma noticed that the once gold trim on the armor was now a dark purple. He assumed Shio changed it after the events with her alternate personality Yami. Menma smiled kindly at his newly elected Kage, knowing the last thing she wanted to do was attend this meeting. Shio noticed the smile and turned away horridly to hide her blush. After merging with Yami and reclaiming her lust, she found herself very attracted to her former brother. He was very handsome with his slightly glowing green eyes and his long hair tied in a knot in the front and long in the back. He was wearing his now normal attire of a wide-sleeved kimono top with spider web designs on the sleeves. He also wore black shinobi pants and combat boots. She was very confused about the situation. Menma was not technically her brother, and even if he was, incest wasn't necessarily frowned upon in the village. Just look at the Hyuga clan. The only problem was that she had no idea how to express to him her feelings. She was also concerned he would not love her back. After all, she was a major reason for his neglect during her childhood. Unknown to her, Menma was having similar thoughts. Menma turned away coincidentally at the same time as Shio, hiding a small blush on his face from seeing his former sister in her armor. She really was quite beautiful with her spiky long blonde hair, and her sapphire blue eyes. Her skin was tanned from having trained so often in the sun, giving her an almost exotic look. He sighed as he thought of the situation. Due to all of his genetic changes, he was no longer considered a brother to her, more like a distant cousin. However, he wondered how she would take it if he expressed his feelings for her. Would she accept? Or would she be disgusted by him? He sighed at his inner dilemma. The poison user shook his head from those thoughts and looked at the door as Kushina entered the room. She now wore her shinobi attire and had tied her hair with 2 long bangs on the side of her forehead protector. Shio had chosen her mother as the second guard for the summit. Despite not being on active duty, Kushina kept her training up and was still known as the Red Death in many countries for her actions in the Third Shinobi War. The red-headed Uzumaki smiled a sad smile seeing Shio, probably still mourning for her missing husband. You look lovely, dear. Now, we are scheduled to arrive in a week at the summit, so we should leave by noon. I have already packed several lunches and camping gear for the 2 of you. Menma blushed slightly at being mothered by Kushina but didn't object to it. It felt nice to have someone fix lunch for him for once. Shio nodded at her mother and they began running to the village gates where a large crowd had gathered to see their Kage leave for the summit. Shio, Menma, and Kushina waved goodbye to the gathered villagers and sped through the forest towards the Land of Iron. 1 week later, Land of Iron entrance. Shio wanted to gape at the large cliff that the capital city of the Land of Iron was situated on. It appeared to be 4 roaring animals facing away from each other with a city on top. Kushina spoke from beside her. The Land of Iron people are steeped in tradition. They follow a strict code of conduct, so be sure to behave yourselves here. Despite not being ninjas, many samurai are very strong. I have even heard rumors that their leader, Mifune, survived an encounter with Hanzo of the Salamander. Menma whistled quietly and Shio assumed it was because her brother studied Hanzo extensively due to the similarity of their styles. Both were primarily poison users. She sighed as she adjusted her Kage robes and hat. She had no idea what the people who designed these robes were thinking. True, they were very easy to remove in a serious situation, but the robes themselves offered no freedom of movement. She halted her fidgeting when she noticed they were approaching the large gates to enter the capital. Samurai lined both sides of the open gates and stood ready for any disturbance from their guests. They walked through the gates and saw an elderly samurai with bandages wrapped around his head. Shio recognized him as the leader of the samurais, Mifune. As they approached, Mifune spoke. Greetings, Hokage of the Leaf Village. My name is Mifune and will oversee the summit meeting. You are free to get ready for the meeting in your assigned rooms. The other Kage have already arrived earlier, so the meeting will begin in 2 hours. Your assigned escort will take you to your rooms. Shio nodded. Thank you, Lord Mifune, for your hospitality. I hope we can all reach an appropriate agreement in the coming meeting. Mifune's glacial eyes seemed to soften a bit as he regarded the young Hokage, as do I, Lord Fifth. 2 hours later. Meeting room. All of the Kage's guards positioned themselves on the upper floor of the meeting room to keep an eye on the proceedings as the 5 Kage and Mifune discussed the Akatsuki. Menma glanced over at the other guards and recognized many of them from the bingo books. He saw the 3rd Tsuchikage's granddaughter, the apprentice of the 2nd Raikage, and even his old friends from the Sand Village. After observing the other guards, he refocused on the meeting below. Mifune sat at the head of the circular table and addressed the 5 Kages. Please remove your hats and we can begin the meeting. Each Kage placed their hats on the table in front of them. Mifune nodded in approval and spoke. As you all know, I am Mifune, leader of the samurai. We are here to discuss the matter of the Akatsuki. They have become a problem for every nation in their relentless goal of acquiring all of the Biju contained within the Jinchuriki. The Tsuchikage, Onoki, snorted. I am not certain these Akatsuki are even that great. From what I heard, they are almost all dead. Garo responded calmly to the diminutive man. Despite being small in number, they still have the strength of 8 of the Biju. Even 1 Biju is a serious enough threat to 1 village. What could the combined strength of 8 of them do, I wonder? Onoki glared at the young Kage, HRMPH. It takes years to be able to master a Biju to warrant it a threat to an entire village. Not to mention one has to seal a Biju into a young child for it to be properly integrated. Shio chose this time to speak. Not if they wish to use it as a bomb. That silenced the entire meeting and Mifune turned to Shio. Please explain your words, Hokage. Shio explained her previous words. It has come to the Leaf Village's attention that the Akatsuki do not seal the biju within children, but rather a large statue. It was not until recently that we learned the use of this statue. The figurehead leader of the Akatsuki, Pain, planned to use the combined strength of the biju to unleash a devastating jutsu on each of the shinobi villages, uniting the world through pain. However, Pain was being manipulated from someone who we suspect to be Madara Uchiha. The Raikage snorted. Madara is dead. He has been so for centuries. Shio shook her head. I do not know how he survived. But we have been finding more clues that indicate that he is still alive, working in the shadow of the Akatsuki for his own purposes. The Mizukage Terum spoke next. Do you have any proof that Madara Uchiha is the perpetrator behind the Akatsuki? Shio shook her head. Nothing concrete. However, these beliefs came from two sources. The first being the traitor to this organization, Orochimaru's own personal notes, and the figurehead leader of the organization, Pain himself. Onoki frowned. Trusting the word of a known traitor and the leader of the organization is an unwise decision. For all we know, he could have been bluffing. Shio folded her arms across the table and continued. Pain would have no motive to bluff in his situation. If he truly was the leader of the Akatsuki, why would he claim that someone else led it when his death would dismantle the organization? I am certain Madara is behind this madness. Before the two could argue further, slammed his hand upon the table, cracking it severely in the process, and shouted, enough of this speculation. As soon as his fist touched the desk, every guard in the room sprang into action to defend their cage from the enraged Raikage. Menma and Kushina jumped in front of Shio. Kushina had her sword drawn and Menma was in his taijutsu stance. Every other guard had their respective weapon out as well as they protected their cage. However, before it could get violent, Mifune shouted, enough. There will be no violence in this meeting. Every cage motioned to their guards to stand down, and remarkably everyone did so, disappearing back to the second floor in an instant. Mifune regarded the turbulent Raikage with a frown. Lord A, I would ask that you refrain from such actions in the future. They do not reflect well upon your village. Now, tell us your point without the unnecessary violence. A glared for a second before relenting. 1 week ago I received word that my brother, Kurabe, was taken the Akatsuki. The scouts who reported this confirmed that it was Hoshigaki Kisame that captured my brother. I do not have time to waste idling her with pointless speculation on the leader of the Akatsuki when my brother is more than likely dead by their hands. Shio frowned. You are not the only one to lose people to the Akatsuki, Lord Raikage. Everyone here has lost loved ones to the Akatsuki. In fact, my predecessor Minato Namikaze repeatedly requested meetings to discuss the Akatsuki that all of you refused to attend. I wonder why it is that only when all of you have lost Jinchuriki or people to the organization that we meet. The Raikage grimaced and settled back on his seat as some of the other cage shifted uncomfortably. The Tsuchikage snorted at the blonde-haired girl and spoke, just elected Hokage and already think you know everything. You should listen to the advice of us old people and stay out of the higher leagues, brat. Shio didn't fall for the bait and spoke. I would rather be inexperienced than so stuck in the old ways that I cannot see the middle path. You are known as the great fence sitter, yet the only thing you have contributed to this meeting is negativity. Onoki scowled as Terum chuckled. I like you, kid. However, the reason Kiri has not accepted any of the proposals to band together against the Akatsuki is that we were conducting our own investigation on the actions of my predecessor, the third Mizukage. Everyone looked at the Mizukage. They all knew the actions of the previous cage of the Hidden Mist Village. Yagura had been partially responsible for the moniker of the Mist Village, the Bloody Mist. May continued her explanation. This is a secret of our village, but due to current circumstances I feel that I should reveal it. We suspect that Yagura was being controlled by someone. Everyone widened their eyes at this information. Controlling a cage was nearly impossible due to their skill level. Shio frowned for a moment before speaking. The only genjutsu I am aware of that can control someone of that level is the Mangekyo Sharingan. Everyone who has attained this level is accounted for except Madara Uchiha. Onoki rolled his eyes. Madara is dead, brat. It has been nearly a century since he died against the first Hokage. Shio narrowed her eyes. Yet by all records we have a body was never found. Before any of the cages could retort, a voice spoke from the ceiling. Indeed, one was not. Everyone in the room turned sharply to see a man dressed in the Akatsuki cloak and an orange swirly mask. The man was seated casually on the third floor of the room as if he had not just infiltrated one of the most highly secure meetings on the planet. All of the guards in the room once again took up positions near their cage to confront the Akatsuki member. However, before they could attack, the man raised a hand in the universal sign of peace. Hold, I am not here to fight you all here today. I am here to make an announcement on behalf of the Akatsuki. Gaara raised an eyebrow at the audacity of the man. You break into the cage summit meeting to send a message. What is stopping us from attacking you now and interrogating information of the Akatsuki from you? Menma quickly shut down that statement. Don't bother. We have encountered this man before. He has the unique ability to turn insubstantial. Any attack would just fade right through him. Swirly Mask chuckled before continuing. Correct. None of your attacks will be able to reach me. However, I will not be able to attack any of you in my insubstantial state, so the only option is for you to hear what I have to say. I growled. Get on with it then. The Akatsuki member nodded before speaking. Surrender the 9 tails and the 8 tails to us, or we will declare war on the elemental nations. Shock reverberated around the room at the ludicrous statement from Toby. Onoki glared at the masked man. Cocky, aren't you? From our information, there are only 3 members of the Akatsuki left. You have no army to make such a bold statement. Toby chuckled darkly before speaking. Don't be so sure. I have the power of 7 Biju at my command. I will say it again. Surrender the last 2 Biju to me or face destruction. The Raikage suddenly frowned as he registered Toba's words. Wait, I thought you already had the 8 tails. Toby turned to, and the rest of the ninjas in the room could tell he was frowning. The 8 tails managed to evade capture from the agent we sent. Seemed to be very angry all of a sudden, but not at the Akatsuki, which made the other cage sweat drop. Gaara refocused on the masked man and spoke in his usual calm demeanor. Who are you and what is your end game? Gathering the Biju and declaring war on every nation must have some purpose. Toby seemed to consider the young Kage for a moment before speaking. I guess it would not hurt to tell you all at this stage of the game. My name is Madara Uchiha. Onoki widened his eyes. Impossible. You would be older than I am if that is true. Madara shook his head. Believe me or not, it will be of little difference in the long run. As for my plans with the tailed beasts, I will use their power to enhance my Sharingan and cast a genjutsu on the moon, creating a worldwide genjutsu known as the Infinite Tsukiyomi. In this illusion there will be only winners, and the world will finally be at peace. Everyone had shocked reactions to the revelation of the Akatsuki's endgame. Mei glared darkly at the former leader of the Uchiha clan. Any peace achieved through an illusion is nothing but a lie. Onoki snorted in agreement with his Mizu counterpart. I agree, it sounds more like you want to rule the world than save it. Madara shook his head as if in sadness. I see I will not be able to convince any of you by words. Then so be it. I declare the start of the 4th Great Ninja War. I growled. Enough of this nonsense, attack him. Darui and C both attacked at the same time but achieved nothing as they passed through the masked Uchiha. Madara stood up. A rip in space appeared behind him as he made his last words. Prepare your armies, your generals, your medics, and steel your hearts. For everything you have will be under trial by fire. For in the days to come the world will be bathed in blood as the moon reflects the world's salvation. With his final ominous words, Madara disappeared into the void behind him. Mifune, who had sat quietly as the interruption proceeded, spoke up in the silence. In light of this new information, I suggest, at least for a time, an alliance between all 5 ninja villages in light of this threat. Madara Uchiha would not so callously declare war without an army at his back that could challenge everything we hold dear. Mei frowned and spoke. Who would lead this alliance? Shio decided to speak before the cages argued on who would lead the alliance. I suggest we form a council between us. We will each lead a section of the military and regularly discuss tactics in a democratic system. If Madara wishes to bring the world under his control, only unity will stop him. Every cage agreed with her words, and a council would be much better than one leader from a country the other 4 would not support. Mifune stood up and spoke. Then the Council of 5 Elements is formed. I pray that it will be enough to withstand the coming darkness. I suggest we each return to our village to discuss this with our people. Then return at a later date for more discussions. Everyone nodded and began leaving the room, pondering over what they just heard. Omake. With Minato. Minato observed his surroundings carefully and saw that Konoha was almost rebuilt from Pain's attack. He knew this was Konoha due to the Hokage monument, but why was Tsunade's face on the mountain? Was she elected in his place when he disappeared? He decided to find some answers from the woman herself. He looked at the sky and saw the setting sun and suspected it to be around 6 p.m., early enough that the current Hokage would still be in his, or in this case, her office. He then used the Hiroshin seal he had placed in the Hokage office to disappear in a yellow flash. Alternate Hokage's office. Tsunade was drinking deeply from her sake when a yellow flash brightened the room for a few seconds and she nearly spit out her drink when she saw someone that everyone believed dead. Minato Namikaze stood in front of her. She was too experienced a shinobi to be tricked by genjutsu, so she knew this man was not a fake. In addition, she saw the telltale signs of the Hiroshin being used, and no one could replicate the technique after the fourth passed away. The supposedly dead Minato looked at her as if he did not just return from the pure world and spoke. Tsunade, why are you the Hokage? And what happened to Shio and Menma? Last I heard they were facing against Pain. Tsunade barely heard the question and spoke. Minato. Is that really you? You have been dead for the past 16 years. Minato's eyes widened a great deal. What? Chapter 32. The Return of Habi. Madara Uchiha frowned as he observed his workroom. The Kamui dimension allowed him to work on many projects without any chance of being discovered. The Kage summit meeting had not gone as he intended. He had wanted to send a corrupted Sasuke to the meeting to kill Danzo, who he had thought would become Hokage. But the brat went underground the minute he defeated Itachi. And now that Danzo is dead, he had nothing to bring Sasuke over to his side. It was unfortunate, but Sasuke could no longer be used as a pawn on his side of the board. The masked Uchiha member looked around his workstation and looked at a clear red orb and smirked. This would distract the Leaf Village long enough for him to learn where the Eight Tails is located. Besides, the Infinite Tsukuyomi needed a test run before he could enact his plan. With Sasuke. Sasuke jumped through trees as he made his way to the path that the Hokage and his guard would pass through. They had decided not to enter the land of iron due to the many samurai about and were planning on intercepting the returning entourage before they could reach the Leaf Village. As they flew through the trees, Sasuke's right eye glowed a bit and Callista was now floating beside him as he ran. He glanced at her and noticed she seemed to be contemplating something important. He frowned and spoke through their mental link. It is not like you to be so contemplative. Callista did not say anything for a while but spoke eventually. I can sense where spirits go after we kill them with our power. I can tell if they go to the pure world or Yami. You human often refer to them as heaven or hell. You have not noticed this because you have not taken enough souls with your powers to do so. Sasuke nodded in understanding. Is there a soul that you have claimed that went somewhere it shouldn't have? Callista's frown deepened. I find it strange that Itachi Uchiha's soul went to the pure world. I would have thought he would be in hell for his crimes. Sasuke felt his eyes widen at this information. How could his brother not be in hell? He knew the rules have to be a bit loose since the majority of ninjas were trained killers, but Itachi murdered his entire clan in cold blood. He shifted his eyes back to the glowing invisible woman and voiced his thoughts. How is it possible he went to heaven after everything he has done? The aspect of vengeance pondered over the problem for a while before speaking. In my experience, even the evilest of shinobi have a chance to ascend to the pure world if they did everything for a good cause. For example, a shinobi could massacre 100 shinobi in a war. But if their reasons for those killings were to protect the people of their village, they will ascend to the pure world. I can only assume that Itachi had a noble reason for killing his own clan. Sasuke looked forward again, contemplating what he had learned. In a small part of his consciousness he always believed that Itachi could have been innocent. But he had crushed it beneath his own desire for revenge. Could Itachi have a reason for the murder of his clan? Before he could think further of the matter, Karen spoke up. We are nearing their location. I can sense 2 females with massive chakra reserves and 1 male with a chakra signature that feels toxic. Sasuke nodded. That's them. If things turn hostile, never spill Menma's blood and don't block Shio's katana. Dodge it at all costs. The three of them nodded and they burst from the trees and landed before the three Konoha ninjas. Menma and Kushina immediately went on guard as the figures burst from the tree line. Shio however only tensed slightly as she had recognized the chakra signature of Sasuke. Sasuke raised his hands in a sign of peace to the three Konoha shinobi and spoke, "Peace, I am not here to fight." Shio looked at Sasuke's emotions, she could sense the sincerity in his words. She turned to her guards, "He has no hostile intent. We can trust him for now." Both Kushina and Menma nodded before stepping back behind Shio. Sasuke examined his old teammate. Shio had grown a long way from the tomboyish girl he knew. He decided to get straight to the point. "I wish to rejoin Konoha. I have accomplished everything I can outside the village." Shio stared at Sasuke coldly as she continued to use her emotion sensing to judge the emotions of the Konoha deserter. He had not said any lies. Menma beside narrowed his eyes at the Uchiha and spoke, "So you leave Konoha for 3 years to join one of its greatest traitors and you think you can just come back with no problems?" Sasuke smirked a bit. "Seeing how I killed the 2 people at the highest level of Konoha's bingo book, I think it can be forgiven." Shio sighed and closed her eyes. Truthfully, at the current state of affairs, they needed all of the high-level ninjas they could get. Furthermore, the people behind Sasuke did not look like pushovers either. She opened her eyes at Sasuke and narrowed her eyes, "All right. You have one chance. If you betray us again, I will end you personally." Sasuke had to resist shivering at his old teammate's voice. Knowing that she was very capable of fulfilling that promise worried him. He nodded and Shio smiled slightly. "It is good to have you back, Sasuke, especially during these times. However, who are the 3 behind you?" Sasuke turned to his companions and introduced them. "These are Karen, Jugo, and Mikomi Yuki." Shio raised her eyebrow at the last name. "I thought all the Yuki were extinct." Mikomi glared. "No great loss there." Shio wisely didn't say anything at that comment and spoke to the group, "We should hurry back to Konoha. We can iron out the details there." Everyone nodded and followed Shio as they headed back to Konoha. Hokage's office. Shio sat in her office chair as she looked over the files that each member of Sasuke's team had written about their abilities. All of her most trusted advisors are in the room as well as Team Hubby. Kakashi looked at Sasuke and spoke, "I am glad you made the right decision, Sasuke. It may take some time to regain the trust of your former comrades, but we can use all the help we can get to fight Madara Uchiha." Sasuke nodded. "Yes, Madara helped Itachi murder my clan, so I am more than happy to help you all fight against him." Shio nodded. "And why do the 3 who came with you wish to join Konoha?" Sasuke glanced at his 3 teammates before speaking. "We are a team and we decided together that joining Konoha was the best decision." Everyone looked pleased at that answer. Konoha was founded upon teamwork after all. Sasuke looked around the office once more before speaking. "However, I am surprised that you are the Hokage. Where is Minato?" Everyone looked down sadly and Kushina spoke. "He disappeared during the pain attack. No one has seen him since. He is presumed dead." Sasuke's eyes widened. Minato was known as one of the strongest ninja in the elemental nations. Without him, the war effort had lost a very powerful ally. Shio sighed. "All of you have the rest of the day off. Sasuke, why don't you get yourself reacquainted with Konoha? Some of the old Uchiha buildings are still standing from Pain's attack, so you and your teammates can live in one of them for the time being." Sasuke nodded and everyone left the office. Sasuke looked at his teammates and thought of the places in Konoha he could take his teammates first. He then remembered a promise he made to himself long ago. "There is someplace I would like to stop first, if that is okay." Everyone in the team nodded and they traveled to the Konoha graveyard. Sasuke stopped along the way to buy some flowers before they all stood in front of 2 graves. Fugaku Uchiha. Makoto Uchiha. It was the first time he had visited since the funeral. He had promised himself that until he killed Itachi he would not visit the graves. Sasuke placed the flowers upon the 2 graves before speaking, "I avenged you too. Your souls are free now from the burden of being betrayed. I do not know why Itachi isn't being punished from his crimes, but I promise to find out the truth. I will redeem the Uchiha and make our clan even greater than before." He continued to talk to the graves for another hour, simply telling them about his life, his friends, and his teammates. As he finished, he turned to his team. more determined than ever to defeat Madara Uchiha. As he walked away, he did not notice the proud faces of his parents over their graves before they disappeared without a trace. Hokage's office, 7 p.m. Shio sighed and rubbed her eyes as she finished the paperwork of accepting Sasuke and his 3 teammates as their own team in Konoha. Team Hubby was now officially Team 14. Being Hokage was definitely as unglamorous as Minato hammered into her head when she had declared as a child she would become Hokage. He had gone in length about the miles upon miles of paperwork to get done. She wondered why he had never done as she did and used shadow clones for the simple paperwork. She stood up from her desk and exited the building only to see Menma standing there waiting for her. She walked up to him and waited for him to speak. He seemed to be contemplating something deeply. Menma eventually spoke. Would you like to go out to eat somewhere? Of everything she expected him to ask, that was not on the list. She wondered if he meant anything more than getting a simple dinner. She looked at his face curiously, like a date. If she did not have the ability to sense emotions, she would not have been able to tell how much her question flustered her estranged brother. Menma coughed into his hand to hide his blush, knowing it was likely useless against her emotion sensing, and spoke. I guess it could be considered a date. Shio grinned happily. I know a great place then. The blonde Hokage proceeded to grab the spider summoner's arm and drag him to Ichiraku Ramen Restaurant. It used to be only a stand, but thanks to the support of having the Hokage's family frequent the place, the Ichiraku family had been able to expand into a full bar restaurant. They sat at the bar when the owner and chef came to take their order. Shio. I haven't seen you since you became Hokage. I am glad you're back. Shio grinned. You know I can't stay away here for long, Gramps. Tsuki Ichiraku grinned. Well, I hope not. I would hate to lose my favorite and most valued customer. And who is your friend here? Your boyfriend. Both Menma and Shio spluttered denials while the ramen chef laughed at their expressions. Menma coughed into his hand before responding. Ah, no, I am not her boyfriend. I am Menma. I often team up with Shio on missions. Tsuki nodded. I see. Well then, what can I get for you two? Shio bounced happily on her seat as she gave her order. I will take 5 large pork ramens, please. Menma looked at the menu on the wall before saying, I will take your large miso ramen, please. Tsuki nodded happily and left to prepare their food. It was only 30 minutes later did their food arrive. Menma frowned at his bowl while Shio happily devoured her first. Shio glanced at the black-haired youth and swallowed a large portion of noodles before speaking. What's wrong? You should start eating before it gets cold. Menma looked sad as he stared at the noodles. I just realized this is the first time I am eating ramen with you. Shio paused and tried to think of a time when they actually ate ramen together when they were younger. She frowned when she could not think of a single time she and her parents went out for ramen with Menma. She looked at her former brother and realized how much they had missed out on in their youth. She picked up a few noodles from his bowl and offered them to him. Then you should eat. Trust me, the ramen here is the best in the village. Menma looked at the noodles before smiling slightly and eating them. They were delicious. 2 hours later, Menma and Shio finished their meal and decided to take a walk through Konoha as they made small talk. It was when they reached the river that they stopped and simply stared at the reflection of the full moon. Did Shio finally ask what she had wanted to ask all night? Hey Menma. Menma turned to her questioningly and she continued, do you? She was cut off when a voice above them spoke. Well, the 9-tailed Jinchuriki and the Plague Master. Shio quickly summoned her sword and Menma rolled back his sleeve, his arms already turning purple as multiple toxins coursed through them. Madara Uchiha stood on top of a lamp post with a crystal ball in his hand. Shio gripped her sword tighter and spoke angrily, Madara Uchiha. How did you get in the village? They could not see his face through his mask, but they could tell the Uchiha was smirking. That is unimportant. However, what is important is you both helped me test the latest invention of mine. Menma spoke in his coldest tone to the masked menace. We will have to respectfully decline to help you since you will die here. Madara started tossing the glass orb in his hand up and down and spoke, unlikely. Partial infinite Tsukiyomi. With a final flick he tossed the orb high into the air until it hovered above the moon. However, before the jutsu could activate, Shio slashed her sword and managed to crack the orb. Madara quickly looked at the damage orb as it shone with broken light in alarm. What? Before the masked manipulator could stop the jutsu, both Menma and Shio disappeared. He looked at the cracked orb that had fallen back into his hand and frowned. The jutsu required the orb to shine the light clearly upon its victims. Who knows how a broken reflection would change the jutsu? Alternate world. In a flash of light, Menma and Shio appeared in the same spot they had just disappeared from. Menma frowned as he observed the area. Nothing happened. Shio looked around as well, and Menma was correct. They had reappeared in the same spot that they were previously. It seemed whatever Madara attempted to do failed. What do you think, Menma? Menma. She looked around and found Menma staring at the Hokage monument. She turned as well and stared surprise. Why was Tsunade on the Hokage monument? Shio looked just as confused as Menma felt as they looked around. Everything was the same except for the monument. Shio looked up at the sky and noticed that it was daytime. It had just been in the middle of the night before Madara had activated his technique. The fifth Hokage turned to her love interest and spoke. We should go to the Hokage tower. We have no idea if this is an illusion or not. Menma nodded and they roof jumped to the Hokage tower. Hokage's office. Tsunade rubbed her forehead in exasperation. First, Minato comes back from the dead only to be a Minato from another dimension. The alternate fourth Hokage had told her everything about his own dimension. Nearly everything was the same except for a few differences. Namely the fact that he and his wife were still alive and were able to have 2 children. Naruto and Shio. He had told her about Naruto's abandonment and how he changed his name to Menma. She was reminded of Naruto's stunt with the partial Tsukuyomi where he met his evil alternate Menma. She was impressed when she learned that this Menma became her apprentice in Minato's home world. Minato had been quick to adapt as she remembered and quickly went to work on a solution to his problem and find a way home. He had inquired about the differences in her world and she had told him everything. The meeting of Minato and Naruto had been very awkward. Flashback. Minato stood in Tsunade's office. The busty Hokage feeling fatigued at what she just learned. So in your battle with pain you overused the Hirishin and ended up using a faulty seal which transported you to this dimension. Minato nodded cheerfully. Yes. I just need to figure out how to recreate the faulty seal and use the other Hirishin kunai in my dimension to transport me back. It should not take any longer than a month to make it. Tsunade nodded thoughtfully. I will provide you with any materials you need to make your way back. Your old home got destroyed in Pain's attack, but we can put you in an apartment. Minato nodded. I would also like to meet my son of this dimension. It would be interesting to see the differences. Tsunade smirked a bit when she thought of all the differences between Menma and Naruto. From how Minato described his Naruto, she could not think of 2 completely different people. However, before the 2 people could continue their conversation, the door was slammed open by the blonde himself and his pink-haired teammate. Oi granny, huh? The blonde most likely would have continued his greeting, but he caught sight of the one man he never thought he would ever get to meet outside of the remaining chakra in the seal, father. Minato scratched the back of his head awkwardly as he looked at his alternate son. He definitely looked like a younger version of him with Kushina's face. He wondered if Menma would have looked like this if he had not formed a contract with the Spider Clan. Tsunade sighed. She had hoped she could break this to Naruto in private before he met Minato. Naruto, we have much to discuss. End flashback. The meeting went fine after everything was explained. Naruto dragged Minato all over Konoha and they talked about their lives and got to know each other very well. She just hoped nothing else crazy happened until Minato returned to his home dimension. As soon as she thought these words, her secretary poked her head in. Lady Tsunade. There is a Menma and Shio wishing to see you. Tsunade proceeded to slam her head onto the desk. Why did this shit always have to happen to her? Chapter 33. A series of alternate events. Hokage's office. Tsunade rubbed her forehead as she stared at Shio and Menma. She still had difficulty believing that Menma was the alternate of Naruto. From merely a cosmetic standpoint, they could not be any more different. Where her dimension's Naruto was bright and energetic, this Naruto was cold and intelligent. She shook her head and addressed her dimension-hopping guests. So you were fighting Madara Uchiha, who was attempting to use his temporary infinite Tsukuyomi. But something went wrong and you both ended up in this dimension. Shio nodded. It may sound hard to believe, Lady Tsunade, but it is the truth. Tsunade snorted. Oh, I believe you. You are not the first dimensional traveler. Menma raised an eyebrow. Oh. Has anyone else appeared in this dimension? Tsunade nodded. Yes, Minato Namikaze recently appeared here 2 weeks ago. Shio widened her eyes. Even she had begun to give up hope that her father was alive. Is this Minato our Minato? He disappeared during the battle with Pain. Tsunade nodded. That sounds like the Minato that appeared here. He also described you two to me, so I can safely assume this Minato is from your dimension. Shio felt relieved for the first time since the fight with Pain. Despite all the events that occurred, she mourned for her father. Now that they had found him, they had a chance to get home with her father. She looked at Tsunade. Do you know where he is? Tsunade nodded. Yes, last I spoke to him he was headed to Training Ground 7 with our Naruto. You may head over there. I will tell the Anbu that you are allowed in the village. Shio nodded and they both headed to the training grounds. Training Ground 7. Minato stood next to his alternate son as he demonstrated his Rasenshuriken. It was a very impressive jutsu. He knew Shio could do something similar by using wind manipulating around the Rasengan. Naruto was instead mixing a Rasengan with wind chakra, creating an entirely different and more devastating effect. He was very proud of this version of his son, but it saddened him that even in this dimension his son had been forced to grow up alone. He was about to ask Naruto how he created the jutsu before he heard a voice calling in the distance, "Father." He turned and widened his eyes when he saw his daughter running to him with a happy expression on her face. Minato grinned widely as he embraced his daughter. How is this possible? Menma walked up to the embracing father and daughter duo. The Akatsuki attacked us, one of their attacks malfunctioned apparently. Instead of sending us to an illusionary world, it sent us to an alternate dimension. Before Minato could respond, the local Naruto spoke up. Hey, other old man, who are they? Minato turned to the blonde Naruto with a wide smile. Naruto, these are my children in my dimension. This is Shio, and your alternate Naruto who goes by Menma. Naruto widened his eyes. Wow. It is really cool to meet you. Do you like ramen? Do you know awesome jutsu? How is Ichiraku's in your dimension? Shio's eyes immediately lit up at the mention of ramen and Ichiraku's and soon entered a very enthusiastic discussion of ramen. Menma stood off to one side and felt a small sweat drop on the back of his head. He meets himself and his sister from a different dimension, and the first thing he asks is how the ramen is in his universe. He stared at their conversation as they discussed in great detail the merits of ramenism, the belief in the ramen god. Menma felt a cloud cover him in shadow and he despaired. I am a happy-go-lucky idiot in this dimension. Behind him the two blondes continued to talk, unaware of the emotional turmoil they were bringing upon Menma. After nearly 30 minutes of ramen zealotry, Naruto turned to the two former siblings. Have you both signed the Toad contract? Shio smiled. I have, but Menma signed the spider contract. Naruto shivered. Spiders. Gross. Menma's glared pointedly at Naruto. Spiders are not gross, they are worthy warriors and deserve respect. Naruto frowned. But why did you not sign the Toad contract? Dad and perverted sage both signed it. Minato and Shio winced and they both looked at Menma with guilty gazes. Menma simply sighed. Due to issues that have already been resolved, I did not want to stay under my father's shadow. In the process I broke off from Minato's family and became my own person. Minato lowered his eyes to the ground. He was happy that his son and he resolved their differences. But he always wished that he could have done so much more for his only son. Looking at this universe's Naruto made his heart ache. Without him, Naruto turned out to be a much happier if less intelligent. It really put into perspective how much he ruined his son's childhood. It was only due to Menma's own resolve that he didn't turn out to be another Orochimaru or Madara. He looked up and noticed that Naruto was arguing with Menma about the importance of friends and family. He smiled slightly. It seems Naruto was doing his friendship jutsu that Tsunade and Sakura described to him. Flashback. Minato was drinking sake along with his Hokage counterpart Tsunade, simply talking about different topics. Slightly intoxicated, Minato spoke. I am surprised how different this Naruto is. He has had such a hard past yet can smile so openly and have such a free spirit. I wish my Naruto could smile like that. Tsunade snorted into her drink. Our Naruto is pretty messed up too. Did you know he made friends with a near emotionless Avenger, redeemed a mad Jinchuriki, saved multiple nations, and redeemed more than 10 criminals with words alone. Minato blinked at this information, slightly stunned. He was known as one of the greatest negotiators of his day, yet he had never done anything like that. Tsunade continued after a long drink from her sake. Yep. That kid can make friends with everyone. All he has to do is fight them with his friendship speech and he will worm his way into any heart. That will make him a great Hokage someday. I'm sure of it. Minato smiled sadly as he looked at his reflection in his sake saucer. The Naruto of this dimension is amazing despite not being as strong or intelligent as his children. He wondered if he had supported his son, would he have been just as amazingly light-hearted in his world as well? He could only wonder. End flashback. Menma stood across from Naruto frowning at the situation. After arguing about the importance of family, Naruto had challenged him to a spar. He sighed and began pouring his non-fatal toxins to his fingers. Do we have to do this, Naruto? As you can't win. Naruto cracked his knuckles and put his fingers into a ram sign, and in a huge plume of smoke the training field was covered by over 1,000 Naruto clones. He frowned and extending his chakra into a web, connecting one tendril to each clone, and folded his arms together and waited for them to attack. Naruto growled at the arrogance of his other. The bastard reminded him of Sasuke way too much for his liking. Not bothering to realize he called a version of himself a bastard, he mentally commanded all of his clones to attack, each yelling their own war cry as they charged the stationary raven-haired man. Menma unfurled his arms and hung them loosely. Behind his sleeves small scythes emerged from his arms. As the multiple Narutos converged on him, he spun around quickly, scythes rapidly expanding and cutting down hundreds of the blondes around him. As more clones attacked, he decided to use the trump card he created at the start of the fight. Channeling his toxins through his web, every clone around him popped as they convulsed in pain as the paralyzing toxin coursed through him. The spider summoner frowned as he observed the training field. The original was nowhere to be found and he could not sense him with his web. He widened his eyes as he felt a massive surge of senjutsu chakra emerged from the forest. He quickly began absorbing more senjutsu by using his chakra web around him. The secret to spider senjutsu is that you are able to move while absorbing the chakra, but you had to stay connected to your chakra web. The more complicated the web, the faster one can draw in sage chakra. Since he had connecting his web through nearly 1,000 clones, he quickly absorbed enough senjutsu to empower his body. Before the spider limbs could destroy his shirt, he removed his arms from the sleeves and exposed his chest as his shirt hung below his waist. 4 spider limbs burst from his back and he entered into his stance with his arm scythes and bladed appendages. Naruto burst from the forest foliage with 2 Rasengans spiraling in his palms. Menma twisted his scythes to defend against the twin orbs, and a loud grinding sound echoed through the training field as the twin orbs rotated against the senjutsu-infused scythe. Soon the Rasengans dissipated and Menma used the blunt side of his scythe to smash Naruto away from him. With Menma's senjutsu and chakra strength infused, Naruto was blasted back through several trees before stopping. Naruto grunted as his back slammed into a tree. Thanks to his senjutsu he was not seriously hurt, but the attack had been jarring. Looking up, he jumped away as Menma slammed down with his 6 arms, forming a deep crater. Naruto quickly regained his footing and used his frog-style martial art to kick the transformed Menma away from him, smashing him against a tree across the training field, kicking up a large cloud of dust. As the dust dissipated, Menma walked out of the shadow the dust caused, black blood dripping from his forehead, a manic grin stretching across his face. Shio shivered as she knew what was about to happen. She had trained with Menma several times and managed to draw blood on several occasions. Menma's pseudo-bloodline limit was extremely creepy but powerful. His blood was filled with so many toxins that he could control his blood and produce a greater amount to replace any blood he lost due to his jutsus. The only requirement is that he had to be injured to use it. She had asked once why he didn't simply cut himself to use his jutsu, only to get a deadpan look and comment, "I'm not that desperate," to answer her question. Menma chuckled as he touched the black blood dripping from his forehead and looked at the blonde shinobi. That was a mistake. Blood floated above his hand in an orb and Menma waved his arm at Naruto. Bloody daggers. The orb transformed into blood kunai and fired at Naruto in high speeds. Naruto paled at the black kunai and dodged out of the way as the kunai splattered into multiple pools of blood on the ground behind him. Naruto took one look at the puddles before pointing at Menma angrily. Oi! What the hell? What are you doing using jutsu from your own blood? Menma frowned. My jutsu may be unusual but they are effective. After all, he pointed behind Naruto. The boy in question turned and his eyes widened as he saw 10 black daggers floating behind him. Knowing he was defeated, Naruto slumped his shoulders. Alright, you win. Menma nodded and the daggers flew back into Menma's forehead and the cut healed itself instantly. Menma sighed and released his senjutsu form, all spider appendages sinking back into his back as he readjusted his kimono top. Naruto's eyes glinted as Menma dropped his guard down and disappeared in a plume of smoke. Behind Menma, Naruto burst from the foliage with his fingers positioned into a tiger sign and shouted, Konoha's secret technique. 1,000 years of pain. Both Shio and Minato face-palmed as they saw Naruto's technique. Minato sighed as he looked at the sky. Kakashi, you are not different at all in this dimension. Before the devastating technique could land, Menma caught the 2 fingers and deadpanned at his alternate, just don't. Naruto grinned. Then I will. Clone exploding jutsu. Menma widened his eyes as the clone exploded at point-blank range. Menma jumped out of the smoke from the explosion, looking only slightly worse for wear as he searched for the real Naruto with his chakra web. As he spread his chakra throughout the forest surrounding the chakra web, he widened his eyes as he heard a grinding noise from above him and dove out of the way as Naruto slammed into the ground with a huge Rasengan. Menma flipped back onto his feet as 3 more Narutos converged on him with giant spiraling balls. Menma growled as he kept dodging clones holding large balls of death. He has only 2 legitimate jutsu. But he knows how to use them in so many different ways that he is completely predictable yet not predictable at the same time due to the versatility of the 2 techniques. He is a walking contradiction. Menma decided to increase his power and began charging more sage chakra into his legs and transformed them into the lower body of a spider. All of the Narutos stared wide-eyed at the transformation before the half-spider disappeared in a burst of speed, erasing all the clones in the field in an instant. Menma reappeared in the middle of the field and glared at the space behind Minato. Show yourself, Naruto. A rock behind the 2 spectators exploded and Naruto stepped out grinning madly at his alternate. You are so creepy but so cool at the same time. Menma growled a little at his alternate. Couldn't he take anything seriously? Naruto smirked as he formed 2 clones beside him and they both put their hands together and formed a Rasengan with a shuriken-like shell outside of it. The technique produced a loud shrieking sound that proved the power of the jutsu. Menma frowned at the jutsu before absorbing more senjutsu into his final form and transformed into his most powerful form. Naruto shouted, you better dodge this. Less power Rasenshuriken. Menma finished his transformation just in time and put his hands in front of him and strengthened his palms with as much toxins, chakra, and black blood as he could as the technique slammed into his defense. The technique warred against his defense as the 2 powerhouse techniques faced off against each other. In a flash of light, a huge explosion erupted in the middle of the field. Naruto widened his eyes in alarm. Crap. Did I go too far? Before he could rush forward to help his alternate, he felt a blade on his neck and turned to see Menma behind him, still in his level 1 form, and muttered, how? Menma chuckled a bit. You are not the only one who knows how to infuse clones with sage chakra. Naruto widened his eyes and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. I knew an alternate of me would have to know the awesomeness of the shadow clone jutsu. But man, you are so awesome. You are super strong but super creepy that it just freaks me out. Menma sweat dropped. That is a compliment. He sighed. Thanks, you are not bad yourself. If we had fought seriously, I can tell this fight would have lasted much longer. Naruto grinned widely. Yeah. Now let's go out for ramen, friend. Menma sighed. 4 weeks later. Menma stared out over the village from atop of the Hokage monument, thinking deeply. He had spent 2 weeks in this dimension, meeting the alternates of his comrades from the Leaf, and was severely disappointed. His teammates were not nearly as skilled as they were in his world. Yakumo was not even a ninja and Lee only knew the Iron Fist style. Sakura was a weaker form of himself, and Mito did not even exist. He had to wonder, if his parents had not abandoned him, would any of his friends be anywhere near as strong as they are now? Could all the events his childhood result in a much better world than his alternate? He glanced down at his hand and transformed it into its level 3 form. If he had not been abandoned, he would have never met Elise, and never gotten as strong as he had. Even if he had already forgiven his parents, the underlying anger had always been there. Long buried but still simmering underneath the surface. But seeing this world, seeing himself, without his family or friends in his lives was a harsh shock to reality. It proved that even the worst moments of his life caused him to become a stronger person. A better person. Perhaps, he should let go of his anger and finally accept who he is. The son of Minato and Kushina. He opened his eyes when he felt the chakra of Shio came up behind him. Shio rushed forward happily. Menma. Father figured out a way for us to get home. We are leaving tomorrow. Menma turned around. That's great. But Shio, I have something to ask you. Shio looked at the spider summoner curiously. What is it? Menma turned to her, the wind shifting his hair behind him as he looked into her eyes. Do you love me? Shio widened her eyes in shock. Menma, what? Menma looked away from her at the statue of his father's face. The moment we leave this dimension, we will be at war with the remnants of the Akatsuki. I need to know now. So I can fight and possibly die with no regrets. Shio looked into his purple eyes and sighed softly. Menma, you may be my brother, but I must confess that I have loved you for a long time. Menma smiled happily, a smile that was startlingly similar to the Naruto of this dimension, and hugged her, burying his face into her hair. Shio wrapped her arms around him as well as they stood there in silence, savoring the moment. Menma looked up to the stars and spoke softly, Shio. Shio looked up at him questioningly, yes. Menma's eyes gained a look of peace that he had not shown since he was 5, call me Naruto. Chapter 34. Let loose the gods of war. Alternate Hokage's office. Shio and Naruto arrived at Tsunade's office the next morning. Minato was already there finishing a seal on the floor. Their arrival in this dimension had been kept top secret by Tsunade. Only people with direct relation to the dimension travelers were allowed to meet them. Which was why only Kakashi and Naruto were also in the room to send them off. Despite the death of Danzo and the dismantling of the Foundation, Tsunade did not want any rumors spreading around about the rebirth of Minato or the appearance of his children. Minato drew the last part of the seal before sighing heavily. Phew, this is definitely one of the most difficult seals I have created. Shio looked at the seal curiously. She was no slouch in seals herself, but nowhere near her father's level. I recognize the basic structure of the Hiroshin, but with several layers overlapping it. The seal indeed shared a resemblance to the Hiroshin seal with several circles surrounding the central matrix. Around the circle a triangle with smaller circles attached to each point finished the seal. Minato nodded. Correct, I based this seal on my Hiroshin. It was difficult, but I altered the seal from traveling distances to dimensions. All we needed is an anchor to our original dimension. Thankfully I can use the faulty seal that sent me to this dimension in the first place. Now, I need you and Menma to stand in the circles. This will allow the seal to transport all of us instead of just myself. Menma and Shio nodded and stepped into the circles, careful not to smudge any of the lines. You could not see his face, but the three could tell Kakashi was smiling sadly as he watched his sensei about to leave. These past few weeks had been a dream come true for him. He had been able to meet his dead teacher, apologize for all his failings, and be forgiven for them. It had taken a large weight off his chest. He held back tears as he spoke. Goodbye, sensei. Naruto was freely crying as he saw a family he never had prepared to leave the dimension. He had treasured these past few weeks. Even if he met his parents in the partial infinite Tsukiyomi, they were only a pale reflection of the real thing. The three in front of him represented everything he wanted in a family. A stern older brother, a fun older sister, and a wonderful father. He choked up as he spoke. I will miss you guys. The three smiled sadly at the two, and a large flash of light illuminated the room, forcing the three to look away. When the light died down, the three had disappeared. Dimensional gap. Naruto, Shio, and Minato were free falling down a large blue tunnel as they were transported to their next destination. Shio shouted over the roaring wind as they fell. Is this how the Hiroshin feels every time you use it? Minato shouted back over the wind. No. Traveling distances feels as if you are simply like a body flicker technique. But since we are traveling dimensions, it is going to be a bit rougher. Naruto glared at his father. And where will we appear when he reach our dimension? Minato shrugged as best he could since they were free falling. I have no idea. Theoretically we should appear where the Hirushun was used last. Naruto looked around the tunnel they were in. He could see flashes of different dimensions as they passed. He could see a Naruto burning konoha, another him wielding a large sword he vaguely recognized as the executioner's sword, and another wearing an Akatsuki cloak fighting alongside Itachi. There were thousands, perhaps millions of scenes as they continued to fall. Unknown to him, but the others could see their own selves in the multiverse themselves. Minato frowned as he saw many versions of himself abandon Naruto for some reason or another. It seemed that his mistakes spanned across dimensions. He took solace however in that there were many more dimensions where he was able to raise Naruto correctly and they grew up together as a family. Shio looked out at the myriads of dimensions and saw many alternates of herself as they fell. Many of her alternate wielded swords are chakra chains as she fought her enemies. However, she saw one dimension and blushed furiously. She could not believe that an alternate of her had that type of relationship with the Kyuubi. She would be very happy to get out of this tunnel. She looked down and began to see light and shouted over to her companions, I see the exit. Minato nodded. Prepare yourselves for landing. We have no idea where we are going to land. Soon the light turned brighter and brighter until they were forced to close their eyes as they prepared to enter their home dimension. Prepared to enter the war. Land of Lightning. The recently reincarnated Madara stepped out of the coffin and stood next to the second Tsuchikage Mu. He glanced down at the allied shinobi forces. He ignored most of them as trash, but he could see a few strong shinobi amongst them. Namely the redhead leading the forces. Next to her was the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi who had recently joined the war effort after escaping from Turtle Island. Next to the boy stood a swordswoman with a broken sword protecting a girl who appeared to be a genjutsu user. He could also see the third Tsuchikage hovering above the group. He looked at Mu. This was not part of the plan. What happened to Nagato resurrecting me with the Rinnegan? The impure resurrection caster spoke through Mu. There has been a change of plans. Nagato is dead and his lover has the Rinnegan who is currently fighting your accomplice. Madara nodded and turned back to the hundreds of shinobi in front of him. Well then, let's begin. He jumped down onto the desert sand below him. And glared at the army in front of him with a Sharingan enhanced glare and dashed forward. Allied forces POV. The shinobi force stared in horror as Mu summoned Madara Uchiha to the fight. Kushina stared at the man in shock. How is this possible? The masked man is supposed to be Madara. Yakumo shook her head. He must have been lying, but we should focus on the problem at hand. Madara was known as the strongest Uchiha for a reason. Lee nodded. Yes, but with teamwork and my new friend Isobu I know we can succeed. Kushina nodded. Lee had stayed with the eight-tailed Jinchuriki at Turtle Island. Lee befriended the eccentric Jinchuriki and the man taught Lee how to bond with his inner Biju. Lee had passed each trial with ease and had befriended the three-tailed turtle Isobu. The two apparently got on very well since the turtle let Lee use his chakra without restraint. He had even learned the Biju's name. It slightly ashamed Kushina that she never even tried to befriend the Kyuubi upon seeing the relationship between the two. Kushina shook herself out of thinking of the past and drew her sword. Hopefully we can defeat or hold him off long enough for Konan, Sasuke, and the rest of the Kages to defeat the masked man. Everyone nodded and they prepared themselves as Madara began to walk towards them. Men and women brought out religious idols and prayed. Madara began to jog lightly. People began to sweat as they felt the bloodlust radiate from the ancient Uchiha. Madara broke out in a full-on sprint towards the allied forces. The silence broke among the shinobi forces and they roared battle cries as they dashed to meet the Uchiha head-on. The initial battle was a massacre. Ninja fell left and right as Madara constantly redirected their attacks against one another. However, Temari managed to blast Madara out of the main army and Kushina took charge, all non-Kage level shinobi to support. Do not directly engage and provide support for us. The remaining Jonin disengaged, allowing Kushina, Lee and Mito to directly engage the Uchiha. Madara pulled a sword from a dead Kumo ninja and engaged the three in a sword battle. The fight was a flurry of swords that seemed from a distance almost an elegant dance between the three swordsmen. Lee jumped back from the fight and put his hands together and hexagonal plates covered his skin as he infused himself with the chakra of his Biju. He flashed through hand signs and thought, deep sea coral gauntlets. Coral grew from his hands and encased them with diamond-hard coral. Yakumo, who had stayed out of the fight for now, finished drawing her painting and was about to cast her genjutsu. However, Madara quickly felt the chakra and converged upon her at fast speeds. With his new gauntlets, Lee dashed forward at top speed to intercept the Uchiha, the Biju's power propelling him forward as he reared his fist back to punch the undead Uchiha. Madara deflected the punch and they fought brutally as Madara repeatedly dodged the slashes and ninjutsu from the ninja army. It seemed almost if he had eyes everywhere on his body to deflect and dodge attacks from all directions. Yakumo channeled chakra into her painting and the world around Madara twisted and transformed as reality warped from the power of the illusion. Lee reared his fist back, taking advantage of the illusion, and thought, if he can deflect any attack that comes at him, then I'll just attack him from every direction at once while he is distracted. He dashed forward with his fist glowing green as he punched Madara. The Uchiha easily blocked the attack with his sword, but Lee saw his eyes widen as he noticed the glowing green boxing gloves hovering around them. He had just broken out of the genjutsu, but it was too late to stop the attack as hundreds of the green fists began to rain down upon the Uchiha. Right before the fists hit, Lee noticed his eyes change and was blasted back when Madara muttered the simple words, Shinra Tensei. The blast had also destroyed Yakumo's artwork, ending the illusion and sending Yakumo away as well. Madara crossed his arms as his eyes glowed with the Rinnegan, impressive three-tailed Jinchuriki. However, it is time I showed you the true power of the Uchiha. A massive purple warrior emerged around him until it grew as large as many of the stone pillars around them. The shinobi gaped as they saw the large legless monolith raise 4 swords to cut them down. Lee jumped forward in front of the allied shinobi forces with a large hexagonal shield to protect everyone from the 4 glowing swords. Madara glared at the Jinchuriki and spoke, how long do you think you will be able to protect them? Lee, perhaps for the first time in his life, glared hatefully at the cause of so much death. I will protect them with my entire body and spirit until all the flames of passion in my body have burnt to their pinnacle. Lee reared back with his armored fist glowing brightly as he dashed forward and punched the Susanoo with a large glowing green fist nearly the size of the chakra construct. The 2 monsters of the battlefield clashed, one with the power of his Biju, and the other with the powers of his godlike eyes. Madara jumped back as he noted his Susanoo cracking severely from the strain of taking all of the blows from Lee. If you think you can protect everyone, protect them all from this. He flashed through hand signs while his Susanoo mimicked him and shouted, Heavens conceal. Every shinobi looked up as a shadow enveloped the sand. Many simply dropped their weapons as they gave up as they gazed upon the godlike power Madara wielded. A large asteroid the size of the moon was rapidly approaching the ground. Lee gazed at it for a few seconds before dashing forward and jumping into the air and spoke to his Biju, Isobu. Help me out here. In Lee's mindscape, Isobu responded in his gravelly voice, let us combine, young one. The shinobi looked in shock as Lee transformed into a giant turtle that covered them. The turtle roared as hexagonal plates covered the shinobi and itself in a dome. The meteorite hit the dome and Isobu roared once more as the shield barely held against the force of the space rock. Madara smirked as he stared up at the 3 tails. Impressive, but how are you going to defend yourself against the second one? Just as the shinobi beneath the turtle relaxed, another meteorite was revealed from the cloud cover and slammed into the top of the first asteroid. The shield shattered and both giant rocks slammed into the shell of the Sanbi, severely cracking it. The rocks broke apart and hammered the shinobi bellow as Isobu shrank to reveal a knocked-out Lee. Madara dismissed the Susanoo and began to walk forward to retrieve the Jinchuriki when a tri-pronged kunai landed in front of him and Kushina appeared with her sword in mid-swing at his head. He blocked it easily with the sword he has Scavanaged but kept his eye on the kunai. I thought that was the 4th Hokage's ability. Kushina smirked slightly. Who do you think taught him about seals besides Jiraiya? Madara smirked slightly at the woman as golden chains burst from her back, each with an Hirishin kunai attached, and Kushina manipulated the chains to throw them all at Madara. The Uchiha deflected the kunai and moved to deflect a sword strike from where Kushina appeared, only to feel his eyes widen as she disappear and slice through him from behind, slicing him in 2. However, since he was an Edo Tensei construct, his body healed quickly. He tried to slash her back, but she flashed away again to another kunai. He glared at her hatefully. This is pointless, you cannot defeat me for I am a god. Kushina panted lightly as she held her sword tightly, but smirked slightly when she saw a shadow behind Madara. Madara quickly turned around to counter whatever the person behind him planned, but he was unprepared for a massive slash of wind that came from the 7-foot-long katana in Mito's hands. As he was cut in half by the slash, he thought quickly, how did she fix her sword when it was clearly broken? As he reformed, he was forced to constantly be under siege from the quick strikes from the two swordswomen. With Mito's extended sword and key strikes boosting her, she was at the same level as Madara in terms of swordsmanship. With Kushina's added assistance, the undead Uchiha was having to rely more and more on his invincibility. Before they could kill Madara again, light flared around him as he felt his spirit being detached from his body, so the summoner has been defeated. HMPH, worthless. Kushina grinned happily, that means we won. Madara smirked. Not yet. He ran through 4 hand seals and pressed his hands in a prayer sign, and the glow stopped and he reformed with the previously decaying body. The weakness of the Edo Tensei is if the summoned shinobi knows the hand signs, they can summon themselves to this plane once the summoner is defeated. By doing this, I now have a body that cannot die or run out of chakra. Kushina grimaced. We will still find a way to defeat you. They resumed the fight, Mito and Kushina teaming up well to constantly prevent Madara from using his destructive ninjutsu attacks. Madara frowned as he regenerated for the 6th time. One weakness of the Edo Tensei was that you regenerate slower each time you suffer a metaphorical death. It was now taking his body parts longer and longer to regenerate. His eyes had nearly recovered after using the heaven concealment. He would have to use something else then. He flashed through hand seals. Mokuden. Great forest emergence. All around the battlefield, trees began to grow out of the sand and attempt to bind or stab the two women as they dodged and cut through the foliage. Madara smirked as he knew they would not fall under this attack. It was merely a distraction to allow his eyes to heal. As Kushina and Mito emerged from the now forested landscape, they were shocked to see the Rinnegan once again active in Madara's eyes. Madara chuckled before speaking. It is time for you to now face true power. Susanoo once again appeared around Madara. Except this time the spirit warrior now stood as tall as the mountains surrounding the desert. Madara looked down at them from the jewel of the being, perfect Susanoo. No one has looked upon this form and survived. Let us see how long you two last. Madara raised one of the Susanoo's lead and began to drop it down upon the two. Kushina and Mito looked up in horror at the large foot. Was this how they die? Crushed like insects. However, before the foot could squash them, a flash of light appeared behind them and at the foot was halted an instant before it crushed them. Kushina and Mito looked up to see Menma standing there holding up the foot with one hand and smirking at them. Kushina widens her eyes at seeing her son who had disappeared nearly a month beforehand and couldn't help but gasp, Menma. Menma felt his grin widen. How many times will I have to say this? My name's Naruto. Despite the situation, Kushina felt tears in her eyes as Naruto accepted his name that she and Minato had given him for the first time in 10 years. Shio and Minato appeared next to them, staring up at the giant chakra construct, and Kushina felt hope for the first time since the start of the fight. Naruto grunted as his foot began to press down harder. All right, that is enough of that. He gripped the foot with both hands and infused himself with level 1 senjutsu and filled all of his veins with black blood, and with a roar slammed the giant into the ground. They all stood there as the giant began to stand up, and Lee, who had just been revived, joined them. As Madara once again gazed down at them, Shio spoke for all of them. All right, let the real battle begin. Land of Lightning Coast. Sasuke, Killer Bee, Kakashi, Might Guy, Conan, and the rest of the Kages panted as they stared up at the giant statue of the Gedo Mezzo. They had soon discovered that Tobi was bluffing about having the three-tailed Biju, but he had access to its previous holder Yagura. Due to Yagura dying with the Biju sealed inside of him, he still had a large portion of the chakra inside of him, which was easily put into the Gedo Mezzo. They had fought against the masked man and his controlled Biju for hours until they had forced him to merge all of the Biju and parts of Biju he had collected into an incomplete Jubi. The beast looked deformed but emitted such a powerful chakra presence. Sasuke stared up at the beast before speaking to his allies. We should join back up with the rest, we cannot fight the beast without them. Killer Bee nodded. You got that right, yo. We need Tomato and 3-0 with us to fight this thing. Oh. The newly revealed Obito stared down at them as they fled to join up with their allies. He would allow them to. He needed to meet up with Madara as well. Land of Lightning. All the Kage-level shinobi of the Alliance gathered together and stared up at the incomplete Jubi with Madara and Obito riding upon its head. Before they could resume the fight, Naruto was brought inside his mindscape. Mindscape. Naruto stared at the nine-tailed god and frowned. Could you mind? I was a bit busy. Inari looked down at the reflective pool beneath them before speaking. I never thought it would end up like this. The Jubi revived despite all my precautions and humanity's greatest heroes fighting against him. You will lose as you are now. Naruto glared at the god of the wild. We will fight together and perhaps die together, but we aren't going out without taking Madara with us first. Inari shook his white fox head. It will not be enough. However, to redeem for my mistakes, I will help you in this fight. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What can you do to help? Inari's eyes glowed and a spirit-like mimic of him emerged from his body and entered Naruto. The spider summoner widened his eyes as he felt his chakra levels completely change to senjutsu chakra. He no longer felt forced to gather the chakra as it was naturally produced by his body. He looked up at Inari in wonder. Inari spoke. I am the god of the wilds. Senjutsu is my domain, and I have gifted you with the ability that I gave the sage of the six paths so long ago to help him end all of the wars in the world. Naruto nodded and clenched his fist. Alright, let's do this. Real world. Naruto opened his eyes with a snap, revealing glowing green orbs with a white spider design and attached chakra strings to each of his allies, empowering them with senjutsu. Each member of the group felt their power level rise 10 times what they were used to and stared at the source of the power in awe as he radiated the power of nature. Naruto glared up at the Jubi and spoke. We must win, for the entire world is at risk. Madara gazed down upon the senjutsu-empowered enemy before saying, now. The Moon's Eye plan will be complete. With a roar that was heard for miles, the two sides attached each other. Chapter 35. Teamwork. Land of Lightning. The strongest members of the Shinobi Alliance stood together against the strongest opponents they had ever faced. The Jubi was resurrected before them with the two strongest Uchihas in 1,000 years on its head. The battle was silent for a few tense seconds as they waited for each side to make the first move. Soon the silence was shattered by the Jubi roaring loud enough to shatter any fragile object miles away. The demon lifted an enormous claw, preparing to smash the Alliance into paste. The Kage took command of defense and shouted to the group, every defense specialist block the beast's attacks. The rest of us will try and figure out how to destroy it and the Uchihas. The group nodded and soon green panels, large rock formations, sand, and even cement was forming a wall to defend against the completed Biju's relentless attacks. The Hokage turned to the rest of the group and spoke, we need to defeat Madara and Obito and release their control of the Jubi. Minato, you take a small task force to the top of the Jubi while the rest of us focus on the body itself. Minato nodded in acceptance of the plan and quickly chose Kakashi, Shio, and Menma to head to the top of the Jubi. Kushina rounded on her husband angrily, I have to go with you. Minato shook his head, your adamantine chains are better for defense against the Jubi, don't worry. I will defeat them. Our children will be with me after all. Kushina noticed how he included Kakashi in that group but nodded, tearing slightly as she saw the determination in his eyes. Good luck, you better return to me or you will be sleeping on the couch in the afterlife. The fourth Hokage smiled sadly at his wife and threw a Hirishin kunai to the top of the Jubi and called to his team, grab onto me and I will take us up there. The four shinobi held onto his coat as they disappeared in a yellow flash. Jubi's head. The team appeared on the head and saw the two Uchiha directing the Jubi. Minato glared at his former student and his new master. It is time to end this, Obito. I never thought the cheerful boy I knew could be reduced to this. But it all ends here. Obito gripped his Warfin tightly as he shouted back at his sensei, everything I have done. Everything I am planning to do. Is to bring peace to the world. You had your chance to bring peace. But you failed, and now I will send the world into an eternal sleep as they forget their hatred and finally accept one another. Kakashi's Sharingan swirled into its Mangekyo form. There is no more reconciliation for you, Obito. I will gladly reduce myself to lower than scum to kill you here today. The Team 7 of the previous generation ends here today. Menma looked at the duo and spoke. Shio and I will take on Madara, you two face Obito. The two older shinobi nodded and they separated. Kakashi and Minato versus Obito. Minato made the first move and dashed forward at Obito, who responded by dashing forward at the same time. Minato had a mental flashback as he threw his kunai at his student's head. He remembered all the good times he spent with Team 7. Obito had definitely been his favorite student despite his failings. And now they are forced to fight to the death on top of a primordial god. He shook himself out of his thoughts and threw his Hirishin kunai at Obito's head. The kunai sailed past Obito's head as they nearly reach each other. Time seemed to slow down as Minato teleported himself above Obito, the Rasengan already spiraling into existence in his hand. Obito recognized the move from their last battle and spoke as the ball approached his back. Do you think I would fall for the same trick twice? He stayed ethereal and allowed Minato to pass by him once more. He smirked as he saw the Rasengan drill harmlessly against the Jubi and began to absorb Minato into his Kamui. Minato threw a kunai away to avoid the suction before replying, maybe not, but you seem to forget I am not alone this time. Obito only had time to widen his eyes before Kakashi dove straight into his Kamui portal. The Uchiha stumbled back in surprise at the action before turning his body intangible to dodge another Rasengan from Minato. Obito glared as his father passed through him and spoke, can't you see it's useless? With the Mangekyo Sharingan I'm Invink Urk. Obito paused abruptly in his monologuing when he hunched over, as if being punched from a fist to the gut. Alternate dimension. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask as he buried his fist into the chest of his former teammate. He remembered how they came up with this strategy to defeat Obito. Flashback. Minato and his most trusted ninja stood in a sealed-off room. They could not risk anyone overhearing their conversation. As everyone arrived, he spoke to the room. I have a plan to counter the masked man's intangibility. The assembled ninja focused on the Hokage as he described his theories on the space-time technique that Madara uses. I have researched his ability from the descriptions of everyone who has fought him and I discovered something very interesting. Madara does not simply turn intangible, he removes himself from this plane of existence. Menma frowned as he tried to comprehend what his father was saying. Are you suggesting that his ability sends him to another dimension? The fourth Hokage nodded. Ever since our journey to the alternate dimension, I have been studying dimensional travel. Through this research I have been able to figure out how his technique works. Madara sends pieces of himself to another dimension while using genjutsu to hide his missing body parts to make it seem as if he is intangible. What we need to do is send someone to this dimension to fight Madara with someone else fighting him on the outside. This would effectively negate his intangibility. Shio looked contemplative as she questioned the plan. Who would go into the Kamui? If Madara dies, the person would be stuck on the other side. Minato smirked a little. Yes, but we can summon him from this side as long as we have an imprint of his chakra. Kakashi spoke up next. Or I could go in. My own Kamui can send objects to an alternate dimension. Perhaps I could send myself to the dimension and back. Minato nodded. Yes, just remember, when we fight them, jump into his Kamui to negate his intangibility. End flashback. Before Kakashi could hit him again, the chest piece disappeared and he looked around the dimension. It seemed strangely familiar to him, but he could not figure out why. Real world. Minato attacked Obito viciously now that his intangibility was negated. They jumped over the back of the Jubi, seeing flashes of the other battles out of the corner of their eyes as they fought each other. Memories of the past continued to haunt them as they aimed to kill each other. They clashed once more with Obito's kunai struggling against a tri-pronged knife. Obito widened his eyes as Minato disappeared behind him and he was forced to enter his Kamui. Kamui world. Obito was forced to dodge a Rakiri when he emerged into the Kamui and soon the two teammates were engaged in the battle of their lives. Obito growled as he jumped back and flashed through some hand signs, fire style, fire cyclone. The Uchiha spat out a massive firestorm that circled like a twister at the gray-haired Jonin. Kakashi activated one of his newer techniques he had perfected over the years, lightning style, Rakiri drill. In a spurling motion all down his arm, lightning emerged, forming a perfect drill around his arm. With a burst of speed, Kakashi tore through the fire technique and was about to pierce Obito when he disappeared into the real world. Kakashi was forced to send the energy of his attack outward and created a large explosion in the empty space. Unknown to the Jonin, the black sky of the dimension started to crack at the amount of chakra being released inside of it. Real world. Minato was ready as Obito appeared with a Hiroshin kunai and managed to cut Obito's cheek. The Uchiha was starting to look worse for wear after constantly fighting two separate fronts in his Kamui in this dimension. Minato knew it was time to finish this. Summoning two shadow clones next to him, he formed a Rasengan in each hand while the clones added wind chakra. He felt an echo of his alternate son nod to him as he used the signature technique he learned over these past few weeks, Rasenshuriken Barrage. Minato gathered all of the chakra he could spare and burst it from his palms, propelling the two spheres forward at fast speeds towards the Uchiha. Obito could barely enter his Kamui as he was dangerously low on chakra. As he entered the bleak dimension, he winced as his arm was heavily cut as he was a bit late on entering this dimension. He looked up to see Kakashi with a sword of lightning extending from his hand. He felt that his chakra was too dangerously low for him to fight, so he began to drain chakra from the dimension he was in, desperate to survive and realize his dream. However, the two stopped as they heard a large crack from above them. They looked up and widened their eyes as the ceiling of the dimension began to rain down on them and an ethereal green light was seen behind the cracks. Kakashi looked at Obito and noticed he was just as surprised as he was at this development. He wondered what could be causing this before his eyes widened as he recognized that light. It was the same light he saw in Limbo. He frantically looked around the dimensions and saw the similarities to the plane of existence he was when he died in the battle against pain. Without knowing it, they had been fighting in the realm between life and death. And they had just broken the gates to hell. Naruto and Shio versus Madara. The Uchiha Patriarch stood on the head of the Jubi looking down upon his two opponents. He was silently glad for this development. The strongest of the next generation against the strongest shinobi of history. It was fitting, he supposed. They were about to begin before a green light emerged besides the two. Uzumaki and Sasuke emerged, glaring at Madara. Shio looked at her former teammate in surprise, Sasuke. Sasuke didn't spare her a glance as he looked up at the source of all his pain. I will fight alongside you in this battle. Naruto smirked lightly as he prepared himself for the fight of their lives. This will be the hardest fight of our lives. Shio gripped her katana as Sasuke readied his ethereal spears. Sasuke smiled as he remembered something Kakashi once said. Then there is only one way to win this. Shio smiled happily as she too recalled the memory. That's right, the only way is. Despite not being at the team gathering, Menma understood what they are talking about and spoke at the same time. Teamwork. Madara drew his war fan and spoke to the three below him, together or alone. It makes little difference. You shall all fall as so many before you. Now come forward. Let us dance to decide the fate of this ruined world. Naruto, Shio, and Sasuke vs Madara. Shio dashed forward as soon as Madara was on the move and katana and war fan clashed in a blur to the untrained. Sasuke too dashed forward and was throwing spears rapidly at his ancestor. Naruto knew he could trust Sasuke and Shio on the offensive as he helped to support them. He spread out his chakra strings and attached them to the two and sent healing chakra, energizing poisons, and nature chakra to the two to help them fight the immortal Uchiha. Shio roared as she swung her glowing sword down upon the Uchiha. Her eyes were already glowing with yellow energy as she used the Kyuubi's and Sage chakra together. Despite the ferocity of the attack, Madara managed to deflect it with his reinforced fan and batted her away with a compressed wind blast. As Sasuke felt the Sage chakra enter his system, his glowing green body turned an ethereal blue as the nature chakra mixed with his Kagatsuchi. He began to rain spears down upon Madara, smirking as many of them seemed to injure the Uchiha before he regenerated. Menma channeled healing chakra to Shio as she got blasted away and dashed forward to engage the Uchiha while Shio gathered herself for another attack. With a roar, he slammed his palm into Madara's war fan, causing a large explosion of air pressure to be released behind Madara. With his palms glowing with the amount of chakra he was charging into his hands, he began to batter the Uchiha with swift but devastating punches and palm thrusts, trying to break his guard. As they fought, Naruto noticed a small crack on the handle of the war fan and felt a series of tugs on the chakra string that was attached to Sasuke and did one last palm thrust before jumping out of the way of a massive spear that drilled into the almost impenetrable war fan that Madara wielded. The older Uchiha struggled to keep his fan intact by channeling Mokuden chakra into it, but it was no match for the nature chakra-enhanced Kagutsuchi spear. In a large crash, the spear broke through the fan and bore a hole into the undead Madara. Shio dashed forward with a seal and got close to the Uchiha. Madara saw the girl nearing him with a seal and shouted, "I cannot be ended here." Susanoo. The menacing chakra construct rose above Madara and he smirked, knowing he was safe from any attack. Naruto stretched out his hand while shouting, "That won't work this time." Thousands of chakra strings emerged from his hand and attached themselves to the Susanoo, spider-style, life drain. Chakra from the construct began seeping into all of the strings back to Menma and everyone he attached his chakra strings to, refilling all of their chakra pools from the endless supply of Madara's Edo Tensei shell. Madara grunted as he felt more and more of his chakra began to leave him. His Susanoo was showing signs of severe cracks as he struggled to keep his chakra under control to sustain the technique. Something like this will not defeat me. He forced the construct to cut the chakra strings. Naruto winced as the chakra backlash of having so many chakra strings cut reflected onto him. Do it now. I can't keep him bound for much longer. Shio and Sasuke dashed together. The former Avenger had a hand on Shio's guard, sending his ethereal power into the weapon. Soon her blade was shining as powerfully as Sasuke's spears. Shio gripped her blade tightly as she decided to use her strongest sword technique. Sending a large amount of wind chakra to her feet, she seemingly disappeared and 4 bright flashes of green light emerged around Madara. Shio knelt on the ground behind the nihilist and sheathed her blade, Swallow's final dance. The Susanoo seemed to cry out as it was sliced to pieces. Madara struggled to regenerate himself since his chakra was still fluctuating from Naruto's chakra drain attack. Before he could fully regenerate, a glowing green spear pierced his heart. He was surprised when he suddenly felt pain in his chest. He can't feel pain in an Edo Tensei body. He looked down at the spear and was surprised to see the face of someone he long thought he had dealt with. Callista was grinning at him victoriously from the spear as she clutched at his soul bound within the dead body he possessed. Callista began to tear his soul from the carcass. Finally, Madara, I will have my revenge. Sasuke stared in shock as the spear he had used transformed into his mentor and widened his eyes as she dragged the soul of Madara, screaming and begging for release, back into Yami. Shio, Naruto, and Sasuke stared at the spot that Madara once stood, slightly stunned. Shio asked hesitantly, "Is it over?" Naruto shook his head as he stared at the Jubi below them, still struggling to breach the defenses of the Shinobi Alliance. "No, we need to deal with this beast." However, before they could react, they heard a large crack as the very walls of existence seemed to break apart. In a swirl of darkness, Kakashi appeared with Minato, each looking very scared. Naruto looked at the Jonin seriously. "Kakashi, what is happening?" Kakashi looked hauntingly at his sensei's son. "The end of everything." Before they could ask him what they meant, they realized that even the Jubi halted its actions as the cracks spread over the sky. Soon the entire sky shattered as green mist seeped into their world. The only thing remained was the green-tinted moon and Obito staring down at them with black eyes. Chapter 36. Messiah. Everything was silent. The thousands of shinobi, civilians, and animals stayed silent as they stared in the direction of the goddess emerging into their world. They could feel the omnipresent feeling of despair and hopelessness prevail through them as the aura of Izanami pervaded the land. Even the Jubi was silent, recognizing the presence of his creator. The body of Obito rippled and transformed into a black-haired woman who Naruto vaguely recognized from the vision he saw in his mindscape. None of them could move as the presence of the god forced them down. Izanami did not gloat, nor did she monologue. She simply smiled motherly down upon the earth, and the Jubi transformed and began to pull every human into the world into an endless sleep. The 5 shinobi on top of the now fully transformed Biju could only stare in horror as the Moon's Eye plan was enacted by the goddess. They watched as the wooden tendrils slowly crept towards them. However, before they could be ensnared within the illusionary world, a bright flash overtook them and they knew no more. Opening parenthesis closing parenthesis. Naruto slowly opened his eyes as he became aware of his surroundings. He appeared to be laying on the clearest water he had ever seen. Blue crystals glittered beautifully over the landscape while a setting sun hung over the distance, bathing the sky in a nice orange color. He stood up and looked out over the landscape and muttered, despite knowing he would not get an answer, "Am I in heaven?" Despite his initial thoughts, a voice answered him, "No, but you are close." He turned his head and saw an old man next to him. The man looked to be worn down and tired, his white hair laying lifelessly down his back. His clothes looked like they had seen better days. However, despite his appearance, he recognized the man, Lord Izanagi. Izanagi smiled sadly at the spider summoner. "Yes, you must be surprised to see me, Lord of Heaven, in such a state." Naruto nodded, curious to what had caused the most powerful god to become so weathered. Izanagi sighed and looked out at the setting sun. "I am the god of all the goodness of humanity. My strength is reflected upon the universal consciousness of all of humanity." The mortal pondered this information and came to a startling realization: the last time humanity was peaceful was. Izanagi nodded. Yes, Izanagi is very clever. She manipulated humanity from her seal to hate and despise each other, weakening me, while strengthening her. Reviving the Jubi, the personification of hate and misery, was a masterstroke. It unbalanced the consciousness of humanity so much that she was able to break free from her chains while weakening me to this state. Naruto frowned. "Is there not anything you can do? Izanagi is currently sealing everyone in the infinite Tsukuyomi." Izanagi chuckled lightly. "I already have." The spider summoner raised an eyebrow in confusion. "What have you done?" Izanagi smiled sadly, as if he knew he would lose something as he explained. "I only saw through Izanagi's plan 18 years ago. By that time I was too weak to stop her, but I had enough strength to provide the world with a savior that could help mend this broken world." Naruto began to feel a sense of trepidation as he asked the unspoken question, "Who is the savior?" The god of human goodness sighed. "The savior of this world is you, Naruto." The supposed savior of the world looked confused at the god. "Me? I am the last person anyone would think of as a savior. I am simply the formerly neglected child of the Namikaze family. I am steeped in darkness." Izanagi nodded sadly. "All true. But those were my own mistakes that you turned out this way. As I said before, Izanagi is very clever. She learned about your existence through her latest pawn, Obito, and planned a countermeasure. Using the small amount of chakra she had in Inari, she coerced Obito to attack Konoha with the Biju. Once the beast was sealed, she was able to subtly manipulate Inari to cast a genjutsu to make it so you were neglected. This neglect led you down the path of darkness. It is a miracle in itself that you were able to pull yourself out from the abyss." Naruto's head was spinning. All his life he had searched for the final answer of his existence. He had thought Inari was the source of his pain, but now he knew that everything bad in his life led to Izanami. He looked at Izanagi again. "But why me? Why of all the newborn children in the world did it have to be me?" Izanagi sighed. "You must realize, Naruto, that there are many universes in the world. Each one connected to each other in the most interesting of ways. In each world there is a Naruto. Each Naruto, for good or bad, prevents Izanami's plans from succeeding. However, what if there was a world where a Naruto did not exist?" Naruto widened his eyes as what Izanagi was telling him finally made sense. "You mean that?" The god nodded. "Yes, you were never meant to exist." Naruto did not know what to think. He was never supposed to exist. What does that mean? Was he some outsider invading in this world? He glared at the god. "What do you mean I was not supposed to exist? I have a heart, a soul, a body. I have feelings and emotions just as everyone else. God or not, what gives you the right to say I was not meant to exist?" Izanagi sighed. "Because I was forced to mess with fate to bring you into existence. This world needed a savior. No, it needed a messiah. Someone to lead them into a brighter and better world where Izanami cannot influence it." The confused ninja nearly gripped his hair in frustration. "But I can't be some sort of messiah. I am just a..." Izanagi interrupted the boy. "An 18-year-old that has mastered senjutsu, mastered the chakra of a minor god, restored an ancient people back to their true form, and master a new branch of ninjutsu. That does not sound like a normal ninja to me." Naruto frowned. "So you are saying that all my accomplishments are the work of divine intervention?" The god laughed. "Of course not, my dear boy. Everything you have done is through your own hard work. You may have been brought into existence by me, but you were nothing but a regular human with the devices at your disposal to be great. Naruto smiled slightly at the reassurance, but that does not help our current situation. How am I supposed to defeat a god alone? Izanagi chuckled. Who said anything about being alone? You have friends, don't you? The Jonin thought back to everyone who had helped him get this far in life and nodded. Yeah. I do. Izanagi smiled and began to walk away towards the setting sun. Naruto looked confused at the old man before shouting after him, wait. Where are you going? You haven't told me how to defeat Izanami. The god turned around and smiled. You already know. In front of Naruto's eyes the god seemed to age until he was a blonde-haired version of Naruto with golden eyes. The look-alike spoke happily. You are a part of me after all. The god then turned and walked into the distance, breaking apart into particles of light that flew into the distance as he did so. Naruto stared out at the sunset and realized Izanagi had never answered his question of where they are. He looked around one last time before smiling sadly. Of course, where else could he be but the place he felt closest to heaven? Inari walked over to the boy and sat down next to him watching the sunset. Naruto turned to the fox and offered his hand. Will you fight with me, just this once? Inari stared at the human for a long moment before placing his palm on the much smaller appendage. Just this once, human. Naruto smiled happily. Real world. Naruto breathed deeply as he opened his eyes. Everyone was still entrapped in the giant tree, but he could still feel all of their chakra signatures as if they stood beside him. He looked at his arms and noticed they were covered in a white fire. If he had a mirror he would see that his entire body was covered in white flames, turning his hair white. His normal black robes had turned white as well and it now looked similar to what Izanagi wore. He looked up at the dark goddess and instinctively knew how to float up to the sky to join her. Floating off the tree he leveled with the god and they stared at each other for a long moment. Izanami sighed softly. I see that my fool of a husband's last resort has finally emerged. Naruto glared at the goddess. I will defeat you. Izanami laughed at the ridiculous statement. How? All of your precious comrades are in my illusion. You are alone. Naruto smirked softly at these words. You are wrong. Izanami looked puzzled at this statement. The human spread his arms wide and felt the very world begin to empower him. I am never alone. Humanity does not wish to fade away. Everyone you entrapped, even if they themselves don't realize it, but they all believe in me. And that is all that matters. Tell me, Izanami, how are gods created? Izanami's face twisted into a snarl as she realized what the boy in front of her was implying. Naruto smiled smugly as he gathered more and more nature chakra. That's right. Gods are created when enough of humanity believes in their existence. That is the source of your power. And just as there is always darkness in humanity, there is always hope as well. At these words nature chakra began to flow into him in droves, strengthening him with the hopes and dreams of humanity. In every cocoon among the tree the dreams of the people trapped in the tree transformed into the same landscape that Naruto has just left. In the dream world Shio looked around at the gathered people and looked to the sky thinking, Naruto, without them even realizing it, they all pointed to the sky and formed chakra strings and sent them into the sky. Soon he transformed into level 3 senjutsu, except this time the insect-like wings transformed into a colored glass-like texture. Chakra strings connected him to every person connected to the Jubi, filling him with even more power. Izanami looked at the empowered human with disbelief. How could an ordinary human rise to the power of a god? Naruto glared at the representation of humanity's darkness and raised an arm scythe. Let us dance, Izanami. Pointing his wings downward he shot towards the goddess. Soon they were engaged in a fierce fight. Naruto using his arm scythes along with his new sharp wings against Izanami's sword. Down on the ground the prophet Aragog stared up at the battle alongside the other summons who had been called for the battle. Aragog could not find the correct words to describe the battle in the skies other than, and so the spider fights fate and frees himself from the web of despair and flies free. Naruto flies away from the battle and flashes through some hand signs, toxic style, drops of the lethe. Golden orbs of poison flew at the goddess at startling speeds. Izanami attempted to dodge but one of the orbs connected to her arm and dissolved it instantly. She attempted to regrow the limb but was shocked when her arm refused to regrow. Naruto smirked smugly at the goddess. The poison of the Lethe removes whatever it touches from existence. Even for you, it will be difficult to regrow. The dark goddess growled and formed a new arm out of darkness. You will pay for that, boy. Izanami formed a bow out of black flames and began firing volleys of Amaterasu flames at the newly formed god. Naruto clasped his hands together but knew he may too late to dodge the thousands of dark arrows. Before he could do anything, a wall of green hexagonal plates formed in front of him. With wide eyes and turned to the side and saw an image of Lee grinning at him with both thumbs up. The arrows pinged harmlessly against the green wall and Naruto flew at great speeds towards the goddess. Izanami made to retaliate with her sword but swung in the wrong direction and Naruto managed to cut her slightly with his scythes. Glancing to the side he saw Yakumo nodding at him determinedly with a template and brush in her hands. He continued his assault at the nearly impenetrable goddess and noticed a shade of anko placing a palm at the back of Izanami and he immediately dashed to the back of the goddess and activated Anko's death mark seal. As he activated the seal, a golden kunai stabbed Izanami through the heart. The goddess growled, pulling the kunai out and healed the wound. Menma nodded to the ghost of Anko and continued to look for openings against the goddess. As they fought, scythes against sword golden chains emerged from beside him and bound the goddess. Out of the corner of his eye he saw an image of Kushina nodding at him encouragingly. Using the opening he once again managed to cut the goddess. However, as the same as last time, the goddess regenerated. Suddenly Izanami broke free from the binds and would have stabbed him if not for him disappearing in a golden flash, reappearing behind Izanami. Looking over his shoulder he saw Minato with a hand on his shoulder encouragingly. Izanami was shaking with rage at the insolent mortal who opposed her. How are you doing this? What is giving you this power? Naruto swung his scythes down as Izanami blocked the attack. They locked themselves together and each tried to overpower the other. Out of the corner of his eyes Naruto saw Sasuke and Shio floating beside him and he answered the goddess, my friends. With strength he did not know he pushed the goddess away and floated next to his sister and the last Uchiha. Naruto raised a scythe and began to pour senjutsu into the blade, making it glow green. Beside him, the spirit of Sasuke readied a brightly glowing blue spear while Shio's spirit's sword glowed dangerously as they glared down at Izanami. Together they unleashed their attacks upon the goddess. The sky lightened brilliantly as the attack connected, creating a large explosion that could be seen for miles. Izanami slammed into the base of the tree that the Jubi transformed into, toppling the massive tree into the ocean. Naruto floated down level to the plume of smoke, hoping that was enough to end Izanami. He stared as the smoke cleared and could not help but widen his eyes in horror at the sight before him. Half of Izanami was the same as he had been fighting. But the second half was completely gone. In its place was a black blank featureless body. Soon a red eye and a manic grin formed on the previously blank face of the monster. Izanami looked down at her body before glaring at the new formed god in front of her. Now you have made me angry, mortal. Naruto shivered at the voice of Izanami. The still human-looking half spoke in a musical tone while the monster side spoke in a deep monstrous tone. Izanagi grinned and her dark side spoke. I will show you my true power. The dark mass transformed into a perfect likeness of Madara Uchiha. I can use the power of any human who has died. Now do you see how truly hopeless your situation is? Naruto frowned and began pouring black blood into his scythes, extending them further and flying at high speeds towards the Queen of the Dead. The two met in midair and they clashed once again. Their battle took them over the sea as they fought, scythes against sword. Izanami pushed away and Madara's eternal Mangekyo spun as Susanoo emerged into existence around the transformed god. Unlike the original Madara's technique, Izanami's Susanoo was female and wore an armored priestess outfit. The priestess readied a bow made out of black flames and began firing Amaterasu arrows at blistering speeds. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he began rapidly dodging the arrows. As he flew closer, the Hokage appeared next to him and nodded. The Konoha shinobi felt the power of lightning armor surround him as he dive-bombed the giant chakra construct. In a flash of light that resembled a lightning bolt he shot through the hardened chakra and pushed Izanami out of the rapidly disappearing Susanoo. Izanami growled and Madara transformed into the first Hokage. The goddess smirked at her opponent. Even your ancestors betray you. The image of Hashirama formed a hand sign and roots began emerging from the ocean below them and rapidly growing to attack the floating shinobi. Onoki emerged as a spirit next to Naruto and glared at the image of his old rival before blasting the roots to dust with his bloodline limit. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Kushina held a hand up to her mouth as she viewed the battle between her son and his opponent. This is. Minato nodded, similarly distressed. It is amazing that all of these high-level attacks have yet to truly land a blow. Sasuke stared at the image and spoke. This is a one-hit battle. The first side to truly land a hit will most likely be the winner. Shio nodded. All we can do is continue to lend our support. Real world. Naruto swung his scythe down upon the goddess and cut through the image of Hashirama, turning it back to a tar-like state before it transformed once again into Nagato. Izanagi grinned crazily as Nagato's arm turned into a charka cannon and fired huge blasts of chakra at her opponent. Naruto swiftly dodged and glared down upon the sickening image of Nagato being used in such a way. How dare you spit in the face of the memories of such great men? You are not a goddess. You are nothing but a demon pretending to be God. Izanagi grinned as the female portion of her face cracked. A demon. Fitting, I guess. After all, it was humanity who created and strengthened me. So I am nothing more than a demon god ruling over demons. And I will show you the power of the perfect example of how far humanity can fall. The face of Nagato transformed into a beautiful white-haired woman with a horn that vaguely resembled a rabbit ear. This time both Izanagi and the Uncown woman spoke. You see. This woman nearly sacrificed the world itself for her lust for power. And your people call her the rabbit goddess. Naruto felt his eyes widen as he gazed upon the progenitor of chakra in the human realm. Kage Otsutsuki. He knew she was the perfect example of how far humans could fall. But then he remembered the faces of many of his friends and reaffirmed his resolve. He knew that not all humans were evil. Naruto scowled and flew down to engage her in kenjutsu as they continued their debate. You may have been created by the darkness in every human's heart. But I know that there is two sides to every coin. I have met Izanagi. And I know he is nothing like a demon and certainly nothing like you. He proves that humanity can rise above their innate darkness and rise to the level of angels. Izanagi glared harshly as more of her face cracked. Ha! Every human is born evil. Your race is nothing but a stain upon this earth. If you knew how twisted your race is, then you would be begging me to destroy each and every one of you. Naruto was silent for a moment as they locked blades before he looked back at the two-faced woman in front of him. What is better? Being born good or overcoming our evil nature through great effort? I believe it is the latter. I am proof of this. I may be evil. I may be called a devil. But at this moment I don't care. For I am the devil that fights on the side of the angels. Half of the bright light that radiated out of Naruto turned black as he accepted his true nature. Throughout his life he could easily have been considered evil. He had tortured, murdered, experimented and manipulated people. But he had also healed, comforted, and loved others as well. He was the perfect contradiction. A perfect example of humanity. A race with no set lines that defined if they were evil or good. Izanagi's face was completely cracked as she gazed on Naruto's latest transformation. What is this? How can you have energy of darkness and light? That isn't possible. Naruto smiled as he poured dark and light energy into both of his blades. This is simply humanity's accumulated potential to do good and evil. This is the power of life itself. In a blur of speed he slashed the dark goddess with both of his scythes, causing an explosion of energy to be released all around him. If one were to look from a great height above their position, they would see the explosion as the shape of the yin-yang symbol. Izanagi's power fluctuated wildly as her physical form was destroyed. Naruto quickly flew away as the black mass that composed Izanami's power expanded into a huge orb, filled with the faces of the dead and the negative energy of the universe. Naruto stared at the orb. How can I destroy this? If I destroy it, I kill off every soul to ever transcend to the afterlife. The only thing he could do was seal it back into Yami. But the power it would take, it would require the life energy of a very powerful human to accomplish. Resigned, he knew what to do. As soon as he came to his conclusion, the information how to do what he wanted came into his mind. It seemed even the world wanted him to succeed in this endeavor. Putting both his hands in a prayer motion, he called upon all the culminated power of his new form and a sealing array extending around him, covering the black orb as he began to give life energy to keep the sealing process going. Mindscape. Shio shouted above the crowd. No. If he does this he will die. Kushina and Minato could only stare in horror as their son sacrificed himself for humanity. Shio began crying. It's not supposed to be like this. We were supposed to grow old together. Raise a family together. I love you, Naruto. Sasuke stared at his teammate before his resolve hardened and prepared the technique he never thought he would need. Real world. Naruto suddenly felt a hooking sensation before he was forcefully removed from the seal. Staring in shock at the person who took his place. Sasuke was standing before him with his hands in the same hand seal that would seal Izanami as well as his own fate. Naruto yelled across at the Uchiha, "Why Sasuke?" Sasuke turned his head and answered, "It's simple. This is all for Shio." Naruto widened his eyes, "What?" The former traitor of the leaf looked ahead and continued with the sealing, "Shio loves you, you idiot. What do you think would happen if you died?" The Namikaze could not accept that and shouted, "But what about you? You need to restart your clan, find love, you have your entire life ahead of you." Sasuke's hair covered his eyes as the first tears since his family's death rolled down his face. "I know that, idiot. But how can I find love when the only woman who I ever love, loves another man?" Naruto could not speak as a person he once wrote off as simply a traitor sacrificed himself. Sasuke shouted as the light began to grow brighter, "Oi, take care of her, will you? Make her the happiest person in the world. Will you promise me that at least?" Naruto nodded as tears began to form in his eyes. Sasuke nodded. "Then I can die in peace. Take care of the world, Naruto." The light turned blinding and Naruto was forced to close his eyes. Comma. Comma dot dot. Comma dot dot. When the light died down, Naruto opened his eyes to see that it was now morning. Hundreds of shinobi behind him were stirring and waking up as if they were simply asleep. As they woke up, they looked around at the rising sun and began to celebrate. The horror they had all faced had finally been defeated. Shio walked up beside him and stared out at the sunrise and spoke softly, "Sasuke." Naruto felt the powers he had gained from Izanagi bleed out of him, transforming him into a normal human once again. He was a hero. That's right. Naruto turned and saw the 5 Kages standing behind them, their eyes shining in gratitude. Minato stepped forward and spoke, "Sasuke will be remembered forever for his heroism. Just as you will as well, Naruto." Naruto looked away. "I don't deserve any recognition." He was surprised that Shio suddenly slapped him. "Don't be a fool. You are everyone's hero even if you don't admit it. You defeated Izanami and saved the world." Naruto looked slightly stunned as he turned to gaze at the crowd of ninjas of every nation, all chanting and cheering his name, their gratitude hitting him in waves. Slowly he smiled and turned around and hugged Shio as the realization it was finally over. Shio grasped his cheeks and smiled happily. Naruto looked down at her and smiled before leaning down to kiss her. Epilogue. 10 years later. Naruto closed the book he had finished writing and sighed tiredly. Shio came in and smiled at her husband. "Did you finish it?" He nodded. "Yeah. It feels like everything happened just yesterday." Shio nodded. "I agree. These past few years have been so peaceful." Before they could continue, 2 young children ran into the room. The boy had black hair like his father but had his mother's crystal blue eyes while his sister has red hair with purple eyes. Shio looked fondly down at their 2 children. "Sasuke, Elise, what are you doing?" Sasuke lazily looked at his sad. "Elise wanted you to read the story about your childhood again, Dad." Elise glared at her brother. "You wanted him to read it too?" Immediately she shifted attention to her father. "Well, Dad. Will you read it to us?" Naruto smiled and looked down at the book he had just finished. "I don't see why not. But instead, why don't I tell you the entire story?" The children settled down on the couple's laps as he opened the book from the beginning. Naruto coughed once before speaking. "There once was a lonely child who lived in the village. His name was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." End. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.